Welcome in, everyone, to a very special Thanksgiving week show here on the channel. A show that I'm hoping does become a yearly tradition, a repeat of an episode I did for the first time last year, being how it started versus how it's going for all 32 teams. This actually was my number one watched video in all of 2025. This video popped off, and I'm really hoping we can repeat the success of this video from last year. And with that, if you guys do enjoy, please do take a second to hit that like button down below. It really does help me out. It goes a long way towards pushing this video out in the algorithm to other people, other NFL fans just like you. I'd really appreciate it. But call this episode a Power Rankings holiday Power Rankings special of sorts, diving into what went right, what went wrong for all of these teams, and really where I was right, where I was wrong with what I said about these teams heading into the year, and just taking a look at the overall state of these teams, where we sit here today, and then looking forward a little bit as well, as at the end of each team's conversation, I'm going to be asking what makes for a successful finish to the season for each of these teams. So we are getting a full-scale conversation about every team here in today's show. Really looking forward to this. Again, please do hit that like button as we get started. But let's begin. As I mentioned, this is also going to double as the weekly power rankings. So we will be doing the countdown here, beginning at the bottom of the list with my number 32 ranked team and building all the way up. But here, as we approach week 13, I have a new team at the bottom of my rankings. It is the Las Vegas Raiders at the number 32 spot. And typically I will show the movement from week to week here on the power rankings graphic. I'm going to show that, but also going to show the number at the top is going to be how much they have changed from where I had them in my preseason power rankings. So in the case of the Raiders here, it's going to be a -9. I had them number 23 heading into the year. And then I'll also be referencing what my actual record prediction on these teams were before the season started. So in the case of the Raiders, I had them predicted to go 8-9 this year, which means this is definitely a team out the gate here that I was wrong about. This team has not been nearly as competitive as I thought they were. I didn't think they'd be a playoff team, obviously, or anything like that, but I really thought this was going to be the defining frisky team in the NFL. Some form of like the Niners offense that we've talked about over the years being kind of the rack bros. I looked at Ashton Ginty and Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers and even Jack Besh to an extent, Michael Mayer. I thought this team was going to suck to play against. I really did. And obviously, especially just talking about the offense, it's been an unmitigated disaster for this team as they this week fired their offensive coordinator, Chip Kelly. Obviously, like I said, I have them ranked as the bottom team in the NFL here heading into week 13. They just haven't been able to get anything right. And I think it all starts with the offensive line. That I didn't think this was a great offensive line heading into the year, but I thought they were solid to above average. And they've had some injuries there that have really hurt this thing very quietly. The Raiders, not only did they not have Brock Bowers for a large part of the season, but they didn't have Colton Miller really since, I want to say, like week 2. He's been out like the entire season. We don't even know if he's going to come back this year. He's a franchise left tackle. He's the best player in that offensive line. He just hasn't been there. But recently, they lost Jackson Powers-Johnson, I would say their second best offensive lineman, and they just don't have the guys equipped to step up around that. I mean, not only has Colton Miller been out, but the Raiders also just haven't had any semblance of a capable backup. They've been going to Stone Forsythe. It just blows my mind that that's been their answer at left tackle, and they haven't tried anything else. But surrounding that, Geno Smith has not played nearly at the level that you could have expected from him coming over from Seattle. And that's a surprise to me because he had a bad offensive line in Seattle, but he's missing throws. He's making really uncharacteristically bad mistakes, in my opinion. He has been generally a good quarterback in Seattle, and that's just not been the case of him here. And then you work your way all the way down. I mean, the playmakers, you didn't anticipate Brock Bowers missing to this point, the majority of the season. Jacoby Myers gets traded away here. Even Ashton Genty, I will say, it's not his fault. It really isn't. But he hasn't been as dynamic as you would expect, given everything we said about him coming out, him being the top 6 draft pick or whatever it was. You know, he's a good running back, but he's certainly not been a difference maker. So the offense, like I said, has been an unmitigated disaster. That's been the core reason why I was wrong on the Raiders. I didn't expect too much from this defense, honestly. I figured, especially after Christian Wilkins gets released here, I actually did lower them in my rankings from when I did their deep dive earlier in the summer. You know, I definitely thought losing Christian Wilkins was going to be a big deal because you look at him as really losing the Robin to the Batman of Max Crosby. But even beyond that, like, they've had nobody step up on this defensive line. Tyree Wilson hasn't taken any further steps as their top 10 draft pick a few years ago. Malcolm Kuntz has been a really big disappointment for them. They put a bet on him, or made a bet on him, to get back healthy after he missed all of last year. He just hasn't provided the juice as a number 2 rusher. It really has been Max Crosby or bust on the defensive line, but that's permeated throughout the rest of the defense as well. I mean, these linebackers stink. The bets they made at linebacker were questionable to begin with, but they're not working out. I don't know why this team let Robert Spillane go. Devin White, Landon Roberts, Jermaine Pratt, who they released earlier in the year. And then back to the secondary that had major questions coming into the year. Outside of, I would say, Eric Stokes has been okay for them, and Jamal Adams has been a decent, like, hybrid defender for them as a veteran pickup. Outside of that, all of these different guys they went with to try to refurbish this defense under Pete Carroll and company, it just has not worked. So they're in full disaster mode. And I genuinely ask at this point, like, do you bring Pete Carroll back? Do you really feel like things get better under 75-year-old Pete Carroll in 2026? And I thought the whole idea of going with Pete Carroll was the rah-rah energy, the rising tide lifts all boats philosophy of a Pete Carroll as head coach, trying to replicate kind of the John Harbaugh hire interdivision that we saw with the Chargers. They haven't gotten that effect immediately, and I question if that's going to come in a second season, or do you just kind of continue to lose the locker room? Like, what, do these players just start looking around with a 2-9 record and just say, what is this old guy talking about? I don't know. I really wonder if it's best for this team to just go full nuclear. Admit that the Geno signing hasn't worked here, cut ties there, fire Pete Carroll, tear this thing down to the studs. Does that even include a trading away of Max Crosby, where if you're going to go full nuclear, like, what is a 27, 28-year-old Max Crosby doing for you in this situation? To me, that might be what constitutes success for the Raiders as we wrap up the conversation on them, if you're being realistic about the situation. But as we know, teams typically don't look at things that way, to just blow everything up. So if you're not going to do that, I think the best case scenario for what makes for a successful close to the Raiders season is that somehow, some way, the offensive line can stabilize at least for a month, that maybe Colton Miller can get back here in December, that Geno Smith can play better football, and maybe you can head into next year at least knowing who your quarterback is in Geno Smith. But that's really how down bad the Raiders are. They just aren't very competitive right now at all. I mean, they're coming off they just got blown out by the Browns. So they come in with the very last spot, and it's going to be one of the more doom and gloom outlooks, I think, in this video and in the NFL as we look forward into the rest of this season and into the offseason as well. But with my number 31 team here, the Tennessee Titans climbing out of the bottom spot. It really is just because the Raiders have been that bad that this is allowed to happen. But I do think the Titans have shown some stuff the last couple of weeks, some competitive games against pretty good opponents, right? Houston last week, they took them down to the wire. And this week, they got beat pretty bad against Seattle, but I do think Cam Ward kind of kept his head above water, and this defense has shown some stuff in recent weeks, enough for me to give them a +1 in the rankings here, up to 31. Now, I had them ranked 31 coming into the year. I predicted they would go 5-12, so feeling pretty good about that prediction. But the frustrating thing as we assess this Titans team and ask what went wrong here, it's that frustrating lack of progress from this team under Coach Callahan, and how predictable it really was when we assessed the 2024 Titans and looked at Brian Callahan as the head coach there. And, you do want to try to be patient with these head coaches. I think there are a lot of examples of firing these coaches too quickly, but it really was a dud of a 2024 season. It was impossible to look at that team last year and just answer the question of where did they progress? What did Callahan do well with that team? Did they play hard for that coach? The answer to none of that, you didn't have a clear answer to any of that with Callahan. And this whole season has felt very predictable that he just wasn't equipped to get this team where they need to go. They fire him, deservedly so. And now they've been just kind of soul searching under McCoy to kind of get through this year. And you're really at this point with the Titans this year where you're honestly just evaluating young talent, trying to get through this season with your head above water and try to make an appeal to the coach next year. So if you want to ask what constitutes a successful finish to the season for this Titans team, it's very simple. It is a continuation of seeing some guys stand out that you can keep building around. And most importantly, the young player that needs to stand out is Cam Ward. And at least on the biggest of bright sides for this Titans team, in a complete disaster situation that's gone as bad as it possibly could have been, Cam Ward's kept his head above water. And we were saying about him earlier in the year, where he's making some throws, he's having his moments. There was that Cardinals game, the one game that this team did win, where things are going wrong for this team. But at least when the Cardinals kind of collapsed and gave the Titans an opportunity to come back in that game, Cam Ward showed he can make some big time throws. He can elevate the offense. And I think that was a major confidence boost for Cam Ward in I don't want to call it a turning point in his career or a turning point in the season or anything like that. That feels a little dramatic, but I do think the more and more you stack losses, it does hurt your confidence and hurt your team's confidence. That win came, I think the Titans were probably 0-5 at the time, to at least get that in there, get that confidence building moment. I think it mattered. And I think Cam Ward has continued to just, I love the term, keep his head above water. He has not been a disaster. There's been bad moments. There's been so many lost games with Cam Ward where you watch the Titans and you're like, yeah, what do you want him to do? Like, the pass protection stinks. They have no idea what they want to do offensively. Calvin Ridley's been out for this team. He's been out there with a bunch of rookie wide receivers, just trying to figure it out. This team has bad penalties, inopportune penalties. They have miscommunications, you name it. There's just not really a chance for Cam Ward to thrive here. But for him to not suck and make some plays and have you come out of this year saying, yeah, that's a QB we can build around. I really think that's where they're at with Cam Ward right now. And the biggest way that the Titans can have a successful close to the season is that you come out of the year and that's still the case, right? But there are some other players on this team that I think you look at the Titans and, yeah, the Raiders suck. That's a big reason why the Titans are getting a +1 here, to not be the worst team in the NFL. But I think some other aspects of this roster are helping them play more competitive football as of late. I do look at some of the complementary pieces here to Cam Ward in the passing game. I think Shamari DK has shown as a high 4th round pick that was a really fun draft pick. He can absolutely play and be a piece in this group of weapons. Maybe not a number 1. We'll see. I don't necessarily think that upside is in there with DK, but I think as kind of a Alec Pierce, Christian Watson-esque entity in this receiving game as a vertical threat, a guy that's made some underneath catches, shown some run after catch, and special teams ability as a returner as well. But to be that speed vertical weapon in this offense is big to find that piece. I mean, a lot of teams are still trying to find that piece. I think you look at Gunnar Helm, looks like a very serviceable tight end out of the day 3 of the draft, or he went day 3, right? Not late third. Alec Iomanner was better earlier in the year than lately. I think he's banged up right now, but he definitely looks like a glue guy with Cam Ward, the back shoulders, the physical catches. I think even Xavier Restrepo got out there this week. So you have a bunch of like ancillary pass catchers here. Maybe you can get Calvin Ridley to come back healthy next year and be this team's number 1. Maybe we're talking about them taking that top draft pick and spending it on one of the top wide receivers in this draft. But if you can lock in a number 1 wide receiver for this team, I think you have enough to work with, at least with the pass catchers and Cam Ward, and then hopefully the offensive line can keep going, getting better. But I also think defensively with the Titans, they've shown some stuff worth talking about here and building around. I think that interior D-line we knew heading into the year was the relative strength of this defense, but I think they've continued to check boxes there with guys like Tavondre Sweat and Sebastian Joseph Day, which were both, Sweat was a high second-round pick. I don't want to call him a pleasant surprise, but he was a pleasant surprise as a second-round pick, along with Sebastian Joseph Day having a bounce back as a veteran. Now Joseph Day is getting a little bit older, but I think you can get a couple more good years out of him. But most importantly, Jeffrey Simmons has taken that leap as a true number 1 elite defensive tackle. He's always been a really good player, but I think even Titans fans can admit he's been a more consistent fear factor type of player this year from start to finish. And for the D-line to keep clearing those benchmarks on the interior, that's something you can really build around. And then you look at like Cedric Gray at linebacker has been a really nice find through the draft. Oladejo, their second-round pick, showed flashes before he got hurt. I think very similar to the wide receiver room, you look at this defensive line and say if they can get a number 1 edge, whether that's maybe they do go sign Trey Hendrickson in free agency, or maybe it is Reuben Bain or Reese in this draft at the top of the draft where the Titans still have the number 1 pick right now, then all of a sudden you can look at that front 6 and say they've got some real opportunities to make some noise moving forward. So it's certainly not all bad for the Titans. And it just really was like they had to get through this Callahan failure of a hire and then fire. And now it's finding that transition to next year. So success is simple for me on the Titans. It is keep Cam Ward's head above water and keep feeling good about some of these pieces to build around with this roster. And maybe even get that number 1 overall pick. That'd be nice too. Certainly wouldn't hurt. Wouldn't be surprised if they trade it down, though. But we're going to have a lot of conversations coming up with draft and all that. But before we go to my next team here, I do want to thank the sponsor for today's show, Underdog Fantasy. You guys, it is Feast Week on Underdog. Thanksgiving week is loaded with boosts and promos on Underdog for your pick'em contests. If you're watching this before Tuesday night, they have a Steph Curry gimme pick. So there's also NBA going on, not just NFL, but of course, lots of football action throughout the course of the week. They are going to have constant boosts to supercharge your entries on your pick'em contest where you're selecting player stats, anything from higher to lower, all your favorite options there. You can go for high payout options with anywhere up to 8 players in there, or just handpick a few of your favorite options. And with those profit boosts that will be out there, one of my favorite things to do this year is you can actually flex down the number totals there, make them more likely to hit, and then you can make back that profit on the back end by boosting it with the promotion there. So this is a great week to get signed up on Underdog. You can support my channel in a big way as well with code TFG when you sign up, and they will give you a bonus match of $100 when you play just your first $5 there on Underdog. So that is code TFG when you sign up at Underdog. Please do play responsibly, everybody, and good luck as well. But let's go to my number 30 ranked New York Jets, staying put at the same ranking as they had last week. And I had them started as the 29th ranked team. I predicted that they would go 4-12. And I would say that this Jets season has gone almost exactly as I expected. I would say I was relatively lukewarm on the Aaron Glenn and Justin Fields bets that this team made. And certainly the Justin Fields thing has been a mess. Like, no development there. I didn't hate it as a signing because it's like, what else were you going to do? This was obviously going to be a transition season. Maybe something clicks there. If it doesn't, he'll help you lose games and you can transition out of it pretty quickly. So as low as I am on Fields, I at least understood going with him. I don't think they necessarily to give him quite as much money as they did, but it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. And then as far as Aaron Glenn goes, I don't think he's done a great job here with this Jets team, but I don't want to be totally negative there either. I think for what it's worth, the defense is playing better and playing hard for Coach Glenn. I don't think they've lost faith in the overall mission of being a physical, kind of throwback defensive-minded team. They've given it their all defensively, even after trading away Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams, which plays into this conversation, of course. But I think they've found some guys filling in, playing hard. I think Brandon Stephens especially has actually proved to be a win of a signing for them. If there's one area with this Jets team that I think I generally was pretty accurate with, one area that I was wrong about is that Brandon Stephens has turned into a nice corner for them. And I think he's actually a big reason they felt okay trading away Sauce Gardner, kind of seeing this play out. I think there is a confidence there that, okay, if Aaron Glenn can make Brandon Stephens work out here, he, as one of the highest, if not the highest regarded defensive backs coaches in the league, he's going to be able to maybe, to use the Moneyball term, recreate Sauce Gardner in the aggregate and get some of these guys to develop and play at their best level. If one of the assets that this team does have is that Aaron Glenn can get the most out of a DB and a secondary, well, why not get 2 first-round picks for Sauce Gardner to help other aspects of the team? So I think that's playing out pretty well for them. The whole Sauce trade, Brandon Stephens signing, Aaron Glenn's a great DB coach. That's all working here. Even down to like a Jarvis Brownlee has come in and totally fit this defense. They trade away Michael Carter. I like Jarvis Brownlee in an Aaron Glenn defense. That made sense from the absolute get-go. And then you've got some other guys in their defensive front starting to play well. Harrison Phillips has been a nice acquisition for this team as well. On top of Joanne Briggs, those are a pair of defensive tackles that this team actually traded for before the season started. Again, you find some guys at D tackle, you trade away Quinnen Williams. You're not getting what you got from Quinnen in Briggs and Phillips, but those guys have played all right. They haven't been like dying at defensive tackle after trading away Quinnen Williams, and they got a pretty good price for Quinnen Williams, who's not getting any younger there. So I questioned in my initial gut reaction those tradeaways, basically wondering, do we really trust Aaron Glenn to make the most of these draft picks that you're getting for these vets when you trade away the talents like Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner for draft picks? It's never a guarantee that you're going to hit on those draft picks, and they're still going to have to go out and execute. But I feel better over the last 3 weeks since those trades. Really, I feel better about the overall kind of direction that this team is going for, at least. And then they've also gotten Jermaine Johnson back. He was dealing with coming back from that injury. I think earlier in the year wasn't as much of an impact, but we're looking at 14 pressures, a couple sacks over the last 3 weeks. Good production for Jermaine Johnson kind of getting involved. So you're getting some positive signs from the defense after the first 2 months, maybe 6 weeks. It was like, man, you want to give Aaron Glenn some patience, but that defense was really struggling to start the year. But they've locked in a little bit, so that's great. That's why you brought Aaron Glenn in here. It's good to see him doing what he's supposed to do. Now, what can come with part of the issues that a lot of defensive coaches have is getting the offense to work, right? Like that was Always Brian Flores' biggest issue in Miami. Like, that's just not their expertise. And this is an offensive league. And when you talk about the New York Jets and why they rank 30th and why they have such a long way to go, this offense, they've been a wasteland for so long here. Rodgers came in and gave them some weeks where it wasn't a wasteland. And yeah, sure, Fields has had a couple good games this year against some shaky defenses. But largely, this offense just has no answers, right? And it starts at the quarterback position. They're going to have major questions as far as what they want to do there. I'm going to circle back to that. But, they constructed this receiving core to be Garrett Wilson and nobody else, knowing that, or at least assuming that Justin Fields was going to be their starter all year long, knowing that he doesn't really look at any other wide receivers other than his number one. So why invest in it? Let's focus elsewhere. Well, Garrett Wilson gets hurt and you're left with a wasteland at wide receiver. Now, that said, they acknowledge this and they went out at the deadline. They go take some flyers on John Mechie and Adonai Mitchell that were, Mitchell was a throw-in the Sauce Gardner trade. I think that's good process. He's continued to have various frustrations as a Jet, and I just don't know that that's a guy that you're betting on to ever really figure it out. But as a backup and a piece with some fascination, sure. But really, the John Mechie bet has really worked out for them, and I love that as an addition because no one's really given Mechie a fair opportunity. Basically, everywhere he's been just covered up by higher talents. The Texans always buried him on the depth chart, consistently investing at wide receiver. They trade him to Philly, where it's like, what is Philly going to do? Catch passes as Jalen Hurts' fourth wide receiver? No, it's not going to happen. I mean, Jahan Dotson can't get involved in that offense as a number 3. So I love going to take a chance on a second-round pick that had cancer out the gate and recovered from that, but has just been waiting on an opportunity. And I think Mechie showing up in the last couple weeks is quietly a big deal because I think he can be a number 2 wide receiver. I think he has that skill set. So you get Garrett Wilson back at some point here, who we know can be a number 1. You have a young Mason Taylor that, given how raw he was and how young he is, I think you have reason to believe he can be a quality starting tight end for you. Then, yeah, you got Adonai Mitchell as this kind of interesting backup. Maybe you draft another guy. Then we can start to maybe see this going in the right direction, maybe sooner rather than later. Not this season. Like I said, the quarterback situation just such a mess. Fields has played so poorly. Tyrod can only do so much here. But you start to get some playmakers. I like this offensive line, and I liked it heading into the year, and they've looked awesome. I don't know that Elijah Vera Tucker can ever stay healthy for them, and if you view him as a future piece, but you got your tackle duo of the future. Armin Membu's been sick. I think the sneaky addition of Josh Myers was always a great value add, and that's been huge because now Tippmann's sliding out to right guard. You still got John Simpson at left guard. Like, it's a good offensive line. I think this is becoming an interesting spot for a quarterback, whether it is a rookie, which the Jets very well could go the rookie route again. They've obviously failed countless times with that. I actually wonder if Aaron Glenn remembers what happened with Jared Goff, where you bring in a guy that just kind of needs someone to believe in him, light a fire under his ass, get him to really develop inside a system that could really fit like a pocket passing quarterback. Tanner Engstrand, is bringing this Lions offense over. There's a couple fascinating QBs out there that I almost like the idea of going with them instead of drafting a QB. I'm not saying you don't draft a QB, but what if instead of spending, what are they going to have? The number 6 pick or something like that? Instead of drafting a Mendoza or a Ty Simpson, what if you bring in Davis Mills, who's a free agent? Or what if you go and trade a 4th-round pick or a 3rd-round pick for Tanner McKee, the backup quarterback for the Eagles? Both pocket passing style QBs, very much in the likeness of a Jared Goff. Put them behind a good offensive line with playmakers and a system that is much more built for that, as opposed to what, and I know what some people are saying, like, well, you kind of did the dart throw QB with Fields. Very different styles. with Davis Mills and Tanner McKee. And those guys have talent, right? They have arm strength. The case of Davis Mills, like he can move a little bit, right? He's not a complete statue back there. I don't hate that as an idea for the Jets. And then if that doesn't work, I think especially Davis Mills, like he's at least going to give you a decent floor at QB where you can continue to get these guys to develop offensively. And then you can look at drafting a QB with, you got that Colts pick in 2027. That to me really is what constitutes success for the Jets. Is that path. I still have to watch these QBs, and maybe I'll love these guys so much that I just say, yeah, of course the Jets take the rookie, but I really think that's the direction the Jets should go. But let's go ahead and move forward to my number 29 ranked team, the New Orleans Saints. And I had them as the worst team heading into the year, so it's a success, I think, that they're not the worst team here as at number 29. I predicted they would go 2-15, which, to be fair, maybe still happens. They picked up their second win last week against the Panthers. But overall, like, I'm not going to sit here and pile on a team for being a 2-9 team when that was the expectation heading into the year. We knew this team had certainly the lowest ceiling of any team in the league. I think generally when you reflect on the Saints season this year, you should be pretty positive, right? Like, I think, number one, like I said, they aren't the worst team in the league. Like, they've been a competitive squad. I figured this team would get ran all over, especially with a Brandon Staley defense. And I'm not quite ready to, admit that Brandon Staley is fine as an NFL defensive coordinator. It's not like this defense has been good, but they have played hard and they've done a decent job stopping the run. Whereas I had them ranked as the number 32 run defense heading into the year, and they've been perfectly average there. And I think they deserve a lot of credit there because a lot of that's just effort. Especially when you look at like a 36-year-old Cam Jordan, 36-year-old Demario Davis. Like, these guys had no incentive to come out here and throw their body on the line for a bad Saints team, but they're doing that. So they're checking boxes in terms of just effort and culture and trying and competitiveness. Competitive energy is good in New Orleans. And number two, it kind of piggybacks off of that, but I just think Kellen Moore looks the part and feels like a coach worth betting on right now. And I do hope they show patience with Kellen Moore and this Saints team, because I think for them to be competitive in as many games as they have, to win a couple games, honestly, like, that's as much as you possibly could have asked out of this team. That just they had so many issues on paper coming into the year. And I'll be honest, I like what I was listening to. We just have Mike Renner, friend of the channel. We had him on last week to talk some draft. I followed some of his content. He went on the Check the Mike podcast with Sam Monson and Steve Palazzolo, and I gave that a listen. And Renner made a great point where he was like, it still might get worse before it gets better here in New Orleans, because yes, they are competitive, but we don't know like what the state of a lot of these veterans what it's going to be, next year. Eric McCoy can't stay healthy. Kamara getting banged up here. You've got Demario Davis. Who knows if he wants to do this again for another year here for this team. Cam Jordan is playing okay this year. There's still a lot of veteran question marks with this team. It's not that they're going to be horrible. Like, it's not going to get worse necessarily, but I don't know that this team is necessarily going to be super competitive next year. And I think that's what Renner was saying, because he was talking about like, you probably just give Shuck a longer leash here, bet on the 2027 QB class, and just keep kind of evaluating this team. But what I'm getting at there is I do hope that if that's going to be the case, and I think that's a good point by Renner. I think that's likely that the Saints probably win 4 or 5 games again next year. It's just the reality of where this team was. I said this the second they hired Kellen Moore, and I'll say it again today. I just really hope that this team shows patience through this and is realistic about where they are. I think teams being realistic about who they are as a football team matters so much as a team-building philosophy, and I think Kellen Moore just looks the part. I think the play calling's fine. Like I said, the effort is there. I think the offense has probably exceeded expectations that were as low as they could possibly be. I just hope if this team does go 4-5 next year, or 4-5 wins next year, that they give Kellen Moore that third year and give him a rookie. We'll see where it goes with Shuck, obviously, but give him that opportunity to really build things up here. So I guess success for this Saints team is much more of a long-term outlook, like through next season. But you're starting to check some boxes, and I think the offensive line. I know I mentioned Eric McCoy can't really stay healthy, but them bringing in Luke Fortner, like he might be the center of your future. He's playing pretty well in there as a guy that started a lot of games probably before he ever should have for the Jags. You've got a tackle duo you like. So you got offensive line, you got Chris Olave, you got a defense that's trying. You're just looking for pieces to keep building. And then, of course, like evaluation mode on Tyler Shuck. That's really all we're in with him as the 40th overall pick. There's really no reason to have any big takes about Tyler Shuck right now. It's just kind of let him play, see what he looks like. I think if the Saints are going to win, or at least be remotely competitive and win 7 or 8 games last year, it is going to require, I think, Tyler Shuck like taking a big leap and looking like more of a franchise quarterback. I've always said, as far as second round picks go, he's got underrated upside, given his skill set to be more of a franchise quarterback. Ideally, yeah, best case scenario, success for the Saints is Tyler Shuck looks amazing, but I just don't know if that's super realistic for that to be the case. But that would be great if that happens. So it's kind of a roundabout, complicated conversation with the Saints because they're kind of operating under a lower bar than pretty much anybody else in the league right now. But I don't think it needs to be a negative conversation either. I think they're doing what they can to dig out of the grave that they dug themselves in. All right, next up at number 28, the Washington Commanders. This is probably the most fascinating conversation we've had so far. I had them starting as the number 13 team in my rankings heading into the year after they went to the NFC Championship last year. And I thought I was bold to predict them to go 9-8 and miss the playoffs. I thought I was, being smart with that. I didn't go far enough. This team has had a complete fall from grace. They've frankly looked so much closer to, like last year when I did this video, one of the highlight teams was how amazing the Commanders are and how wrong I was to have ranked them 31st heading into the year. Well, right now, you're seeing all of those roster warts, why they did come in so low for me heading into last year. And now, obviously, they find themselves back in that category for now. Now, you have to start by saying this. If Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin were healthy, which those guys just have basically been unavailable for the vast majority of this season, I don't think this is the 28th team in the league, but I still think they're struggling. I still think they're going through it if they have those guys and are probably, I don't even know if their record is that much better, but they're probably not losing in as bad of fashion as they are. They're probably in the 20 to 23 range as far as rankings, but I don't think those two guys being healthy just fixes everything here. And on top of that, Jaden Daniels hasn't been the superhero that he was in his rookie season when he has played. So you got to see him get back to that level at some point. And even their best defensive player, it has been out. Dorrance Armstrong's been out the last month or so. Now, Dorrance Armstrong shouldn't be your best defensive player, and that brings you right back to the root of the issue here, that this is just an untalented roster and a very old roster that this team, talk about what we just said, like it's so important for teams to understand who they truly are and be realistic about that. And the Commanders just weren't. From the second that they started winning last year, I think the moment they traded for Marshawn Lattimore, they were making mistakes as a team building philosophy with this team. They went too far over the edge with this, like, you got to capitalize on the rookie contract thing. Like, yes, it's important, but you still have to make smart decisions. and build things up the right way. And the Commanders just haven't done that. Like, they're the oldest roster in the league, and they've made all these bets on veterans, bringing Bobby Wagner back, signing Von Miller, trading a draft pick for Deebo Samuel, going back to last year, trading for Marshawn Lattimore, even down to like giving significant playing time to guys like Eddie Goldman and Jonathan Jones. It's just, number one, this team feels old and slow, and that's not helping them winning games right now. Like, the guys they brought in aren't even making big impacts. It'd be one thing if they were. But it's also now, like, now that you have regressed back to the mean, you have, shifted back towards really where you should have been realistic about this team, that you're just not ready to compete for a Super Bowl with where this team is at. Even if you got hot and healthy at the end of last year and had this perfect storm of beating an injured Lions team that played super out of body in that game, uncharacteristically turning the ball over, kind of opening the door for you to go to the NFC Championship, you still had to be realistic about the progress you had to make with this team, and, getting younger and building up the core of this team that just doesn't exist. There is no core of the Washington Commanders. It is Jaden Daniels and a 30-year-old Terry McLaurin and a 32-year-old Laramie Tunsil. That's your core. I mean, you now sit with no answers as far as who the young building blocks of this team are, because you've been trading away draft picks for veterans, and not just the draft picks, you've been roadblocking some of the younger players that do exist by bringing in some of these veterans. So you haven't even given the playing time to day 3 draft picks and young players to see if maybe those can be building blocks for you. So it's a double-edged sword when you trade these draft picks and sign these veterans, that, like, yeah, you're giving up the actual capital, which isn't great, but it's also just the playing time is an asset for young players as well that you're not gifting to young guys too. So by being so unrealistic about who they are as a football team, they've dug themselves into a very challenging spot where now success for this team, it transcends the remainder of this season. Like, this is a lost season at this point, because they're not playing young players. That's not going to change. I don't think they're going to keep trying to compete, because that's Dan Quinn's mentality. And like I said, because of all the draft picks that they have traded for guys like Lattimore and Tunsil and Deebo, there's less kind of mid-range young players that you would even want to play to begin with. So the rest of this year is a lost cause. For me, success for this team is a youth movement in the offseason. It reminds me a lot of the 2023 Rams, where they loaded up on draft picks, and it wasn't necessarily like high draft picks either. It took, I'd have to go back and see how they did this, whether it was trading away veterans or comp picks or trading down in the draft. But I really think the Commanders need to just, like, those Rams draft classes had like 12 to 15 draft picks in them. The Commanders got to find a way to move down in the draft, to trade away any veterans you can, probably outside of Laramie Tunsil, which I will admit, like, despite everything I've said, that's a trade I would make again. I think offensive line trades almost never happen. So when you get the opportunity to get a franchise left tackle for a QB like Jaden Daniels, you do that again. And Tunsil's been great. There's a little bit of a trade-off where those are a lot of draft picks that you gave up to get Tunsil. And that plays into this, of course. But that's the one trade where it's like, I think you're fine making that deal again. It does put them in a tougher spot here, of course. But overall, like I said, I would be shopping any veterans you can. I don't necessarily know who those guys might be on this team at this state and time. I think Deebo is going to be a free agent. I was surprised they didn't try to get picks for like Andrew Wiley, Nick Allegretti would have made sense. Even down to like Deron Payne, Jacob Martin. Like, I think they already kind of failed this a little bit at the deadline, honestly. But certainly come draft day, like, I would be moving back every time you get a phone call. I would just take it, because I think they just need players that need to get in there, and then they they need to do good. Like, they need to do a good job with their scouting and hit on some of these picks. They've been pretty hit or miss with this front office outside of the Jaden Daniels pick. Sainris still's taken a step back this year. Jerjon Newton as a second-round pick's been okay, but like Ben Sinnott was a second-round pick. Again, they're road blocking him with Zach Ertz. We have no idea if Ben Sinnott, who is a second-round pick, can play. The Brandon Coleman pick's been a disaster. They just haven't really hit on any of these day 3 guys, it feels like, either. So they've got to do a better job scouting and drafting. But I really think success for the Washington Commanders is a youth movement in the 2025 offseason. Whatever happens the rest of this year does not matter. I would love to see Jaden Daniels get back out there and play better. But at the same time, you got to keep Daniels healthy as well. I don't want to see him go out there and get another injury in a lost season as well. So there's a lot going on with this Washington team. Clearly, it has been, though, a worst case scenario season for the Commanders. And on one hand, I'm proud to say that I predicted them to miss the playoffs after they went to the NFC Championship last year. I know I'm not alone in predicting regression for this team, though. It definitely felt pretty obvious when you looked at this roster that was possible. So I can't take too many victory laps on that. And if anything, I didn't go far enough as far as what the floor of this Commanders team might be. But let's go ahead and move on to our next team. It's the number 27 ranked Cleveland Browns, who I had ranked 30th coming into the year. I predicted a 4-13 season for them. And I would say this Browns year has gone almost exactly as, myself, but I think most people probably predicted. So it's par for the course with Cleveland here. I will say it is pretty crazy how predictable their quarterback situation has been this year. I know I'm not the only one that said this, but it felt like, okay, they say they want Flacco. That's not going to last. They say they prefer Dylan Gabriel to Shedeur Sanders. Say whatever you want about Shedeur hurting his draft stock. And, there's a reason he fell to the 5th round. He was going to be a very loud, maybe not him necessarily, though I think we have discovered some off-field maturity stuff with the speeding tickets and the TikTok videos and some of the stuff that's surfaced. I don't think it's the end of the world, but overall, you knew if you spent a 3rd or 4th round pick on Shedeur to be your backup quarterback, the second your starter throws a pick, you're going to have this Shedeur fan cloud over your organization, begging you to start him. And Cleveland signed up for that circus. But say whatever you want about his fall in the draft, Shedeur was a better quarterback prospect than Dylan Gabriel, and certainly a higher upside one than Dylan Gabriel. So the Browns told us they like the idea of Dylan Gabriel as this point guard, mid-round, kind of high floor, low ceiling rookie. Okay, well, how long is that going to last when your offense is a mess and Dylan Gabriel, as high floor as he might be, is still a rookie? And then Shedeur is inevitably going to play at some point, and then he's going to step in. And I think my take on that is he's probably going to play okay. I don't know that he's necessarily proved that he can play okay, but he did make a special throw against the Raiders, gets a win in his first start, and certainly gives you more appeal than Dylan Gabriel. So I would say it's pretty crazy how the Browns quarterback situation has played out almost exactly as you could have imagined, minus any Kenny Pickett conversations from earlier in the offseason. But outside of that, I would say, yeah, the Browns season has gone almost exactly as you could have feared, I guess. The defense has been really good. That's not a huge surprise. The questions on this team were surrounding the offense, not really the defense. Yeah, they took a step back last year, but you still liked Jim Schwartz, I think. You felt they had talent, obviously, on the D-line, but in the secondary as well, and they've taken over some games with that defense, most recently against the Raiders. I think, I certainly like this draft. I think a lot of people liked this draft for Cleveland. Really down the board, from Mason Graham, who's maybe been the biggest disappointment out of this draft. He's been fine, but not impact player out the gate for a top 5 D-line pick. But, I mean, Schlesinger, I liked that pick, but he's been even better earlier than I expected. I thought he might take a couple years to get there, but I really liked his potential at linebacker, and he's showing that earlier than you would expect. I love Judkins where they took him. Harold Fannin was a huge my guy in this draft, all the way down to like Dylan Sampson. I wasn't the biggest Dylan Sampson guy, but him in the 4th round was a great value, and he's made some plays for this team. So like their draft looks really good. The defense is playing well, like I said, but the frustrating thing with the Browns is I'm getting really, really exhausted and impatient with the Kevin Stefanski of it all. I just don't get why he gets such a long leash and so much benefit of the doubt when this has been a rudderless offense since 2022, when Jacoby Brissett was their quarterback. That was the last time I thought Kevin Stefanski was doing a good job with this team. I mean, he wins Coach of the Year in 2023 for what? For hiring Jim Schwartz? I mean, come on. Like, that Browns team was all about the defense, and then Joe Flacco and Amari Cooper going on a miracle run. I didn't watch that offense and say, oh yeah, Kevin Stefanski's doing a great job. No, it was just Flacco heaving bombs to Amari Cooper, who had the best stretch of play in his career. That was crazy. He's now won 2 Coach of the Year awards in the 2020s, and I just don't understand. I mean, for the last 3 years, the offensive line has continued to regress. Their receiver room has regressed big time. I mean, Jerry Jeudy might be the worst receiver in the NFL this year. And then nobody else has really stepped up. Cedric Tillman's been hurt. That doesn't help. But I feel like Tillman could have taken a bigger leap by now than he has. Every quarterback that's played since Jacoby Brissett has been worse than you expected. I mean, seriously, I really don't think Flacco played that well for this Browns team. I just don't. I think he heaved the ball and eventually it caught up with him in a year that he had a bunch of turnover-worthy plays. I mean, okay, Jameis was in here with that same philosophy. That didn't go well. You've had Deshaun Watson. We saw what he looked like inside this offense. Joe Flacco this year played much better in Cincinnati once he left Cleveland. Dylan Gabriel played really poorly. I think Dylan Gabriel at least had a high floor coming out, probably could have looked better than he has this year. And look, Shedeur made that big throw against the Raiders, but he's otherwise looked horrible. And throw out him falling to the 5th round, I still thought he was a Brock Purdy-esque kind of potential prospect. He should probably look better here in this offense, if I'm being completely honest about it. And we'll see if that can happen. But I just don't get what the identity of this offense is. Where's the progress? None of it. So that's the big frustrating thing with the Browns, is that Stefanski, like, he's being talked about, if he gets fired here, he's going to get automatically hired somewhere else. And I'm like, what? What Cleveland Browns have you been watching for the last 3 years? This team has pockets of talent to work with. And for me, it's like Stefanski's inability to tap into, whether it's feeding David Njoku or to get the run game going, to get any of these QBs to have, any semblance of success. It's very frustrating. So for me, it's hard to answer the question of what constitutes success for the Browns the rest of the way. Obviously, in an ideal world, Shedeur plays great and earns the starting job into 2026, and Stefanski found his quarterback and all this. I think that's pretty unrealistic, honestly. It's possible, but it's unrealistic. I wonder if it's best that this team bottoms out. And if that comes at the expense of Shedeur, that really sucks. But I wonder if success for the Browns, even though they've had some fun this year, if success for this team is just don't win another game, move on from Stefanski and get more of a direction with this offense, because it is actually a pretty cozy situation with Jim Schwartz there, who's not getting another head coaching job anytime soon. You can just set it and forget it with him and that defense. Like, they got a good thing going on that side of the ball. it's actually not a bad situation with a good rookie class to put an offensive minded head coach in there and kind of reset this thing. So I don't know if that's overly harsh on Kevin Stefanski, but every single time I think of the Browns, it's like, why is this offense stagnated as much as it has, given how much praise we give Stefanski as a coach? At some point, it's got to come back to him, in my opinion. But let's go ahead and move on to my number 26 ranked New York Giants, who started the season ranked 26th. So on the money there. Now, I did predict them to go 6-11 with that very challenging schedule. They've obviously lost more games than that. I don't know that I'm going to apologize for this prediction when they're still right at this spot, and they've had these just incredible late game collapses. I think this team is about a 6-11 talent as a football team. They've had a very challenging schedule, and they've lost a bunch of close games that they've collapsed in the end at in historic fashion. So as far as where it went right, where it went wrong, I think this team has, generally speaking, been par for the course. Now, there's a lot of peripheral stuff going on, right? Like, obviously, Dable loses his job here. I still don't know what my take is on this. In my heart of hearts, I still believe in Brian Dable, and I actually don't know that he did that bad of a job here. He's the one that wanted Dart, by all accounts. The offense has probably overachieved this year. They find Scatterbo after losing Neighbors, you lose Scatterbo. As far as Dable's primary objective here to get this offense going and figuring things out there, he kind of accomplished what you could have asked for there, but it's also incredibly frustrating that he couldn't see the writing on the wall that Shane Bowen, after what we saw from him last year, just isn't good enough as a DC. And all of these teams' late game collapses, it's unbelievable that you have that defensive line and you can't slam the door shut in any of these games. When you have multiple score leads, teams are in passing game scripts, and you can't slam the door shut. It's pathetic. And ultimately, unfortunately, we all saw the hard knocks. Brian Dable handpicked Shane Bowen and refused to move on from him. And it cost him his job. So that's all, kind of a side narrative with the Giants at this point. But very fascinating how the Brian Dable thing has played out. But besides that, This might be the most encouraging 2-10 season of all time that I can remember. You draft a QB in the 20s, and he looks extremely promising. You nail what looks like a superstar fourth-round running back in Cam Scatterbo. You have located some ancillary weapons in Wan'Dale Robinson. Theo Johnson have really stepped up. Theo Johnson, especially in recent weeks, feels like he's catching everything. Wan'Dale's had some really explosive moments this year, showing more as a vertical threat. That's all with Malik Neighbors getting hurt to start the season was just devastating. So you look at this offense, and by the way, the offensive line, that's another thing with Dable getting fired. It's like, well, they finally got the O-line working, and then they fire Dable. It's just kind of crazy. But the offensive line is playing better than they have in a long time here, certainly as they ever have in the Brian Dable era. And you look at this team now with that defensive line and a really good infrastructure with an interesting young quarterback. I mean, it's hard to think of a 2-10 team that you feel more encouraged that they can turn this thing around in a hurry. And you have a top draft pick because you've won 2 games because they've blown all these late games. So while the overall prediction on the Giants has been a little bit all over the place, right? Like, I think my ranking on them is the 26th team, and I still have them as the 26th team. I think that's been perfectly fine. Even the 6-11 record prediction, like I said, they should have more than 2 wins. And I don't know how you argue otherwise there. They've been better than a 2-win team. But besides all that, like, I think this has been as good of a year as you could draw up for a 2-win football team for all the reasons I said. So as we look forward, I think what constitutes success for the Giants is that, number one, you don't get Jackson Dart injured again. I think you be very careful with him coming back. Make sure he's 100%. And when he does come back, I would love to see him slide. You can still be an effective QB runner and learn not to take all these hits, because as much as it sucks to say, it only felt like a matter of time before Jackson Dart suffered an injury, and it really felt like one of the least surprising injuries that we've seen. So he's got to learn to slide. I think that's honestly a big takeaway that you want to see for this team this year if he comes back. And then as I think about the coaching hire and all that stuff, we'll have a lot more conversations. We will do a coaching carousel show. I usually do that show in January. But I would love, if we talk about the rest of the year for the Giants here, I would love to keep seeing the offense in this now Mike Kafka offense, which is an extension of Brian Daboll. I would love to see them continue to have success. And I mean, he was in his bag as a play caller against Detroit. Trick plays, the offense. I thought his first game as the head coach against Green Bay, I thought they did a great job coming up with a game plan for how to attack that defense, and they executed it. I think Kafka has done a great job in the 2 weeks as interim head coach. But I don't even hate the idea of him as the head coach, but certainly keeping him on board as the offensive coordinator so that you keep that continuity with Jackson Dart. I think, for me, when you talk about this, what makes for a successful finish to the season, anything other than Mike Kafka as the offensive coordinator, whether that's as the head coach or the offensive coordinator, that would be a failure for me. If you're a Giants fan, that would be a major question mark, because I think it's just a continuation of what Brian Daboll built here, but it's an opportunity maybe to keep Kafka on as the offensive coordinator. And then can you bring in a Chris Shula? I know it really sucks that this is the team that had the lawsuit with Brian Flores, because God, Brian Flores with this D-line would be insane. But can you actually get an elite defense in here and keep things rolling on offense? That to me is success. I really am starting to like the idea of go for a defensive head coach here to settle things down and just let the offense keep doing their thing on that side of the ball. All right, next up, the 25th ranked Arizona Cardinals. And by the way, for those following the power rankings closely, that was our bottom tier of teams. We are now into the frisky category of NFL teams. So taking a slight jump in competitive energy for these teams. But the Arizona Cardinals, I think competitive energy describes this team this year. Competitive in a bunch of losses this year. Heading into the year, I was pretty optimistic about the Arizona Cardinals. I think this was one of the teams I was most wrong about. Ranking them 17th, predicting them to go 9-8. I don't think I was fully off, considering they have been so competitive. But at some point, you got to close out some of these close games, and this has overall been an incredibly frustrating team that I, at the end of the day, wish I didn't show as much faith in. I think I even called them a post-hype sleeper and a playoff sleeper this year. They feel pretty damn far removed from that. Now, I will say this. Probably the core pillar of why I was optimistic about this team was the Kyler Murray plus Marvin Harrison, QB plus wide receiver 1 in his second year. That pillar of this team, of this organization, I thought was supposed to be such a big backbone for this team and a reason why I thought they could make some noise this year. And that entire pillar of that combination of Kyler and Marvin has not been there, because you start the year, and let's just call it what it is, Marvin Harrison freaking sucked for the first 3 weeks of this season. He had bad drops. He was not winning those signature contested catches that were probably the defining strength in his game coming out of Ohio State. something we've seen him do at the NFL level, the body control, the size, the ability to attack the football. He was just like uncharacteristic. Even if he's had his frustrations in his career so far, there was a reason that the Cardinals were constructing their offense around red zone fades, and it's 3rd and 8. We're going to throw the ball on the deep corner route to Marv so that he can box out the defender and get us a first down. And look, I understand Kyler's getting a lot of hate. Jacoby stepped in for a few weeks, and Jacoby played great, even better than Kyler had played. The reality of the tape in the first 3 weeks is no, Kyler is not Patrick Mahomes. He's not a perfect quarterback. No one's saying that. But Marvin and some of the other wide receivers really let him down for the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season. And then Kyler gets hurt. So he's out. And the second Kyler gets hurt, and really right before he got hurt, the end of that Seahawks game, Marvin Harrison with Kyler Murray at the end of that game decided, yeah, I'm going to go be Marvin Harrison Jr. again. So Marvin starts playing awesome again. Then Jacoby comes into the lineup. And now they're both out because Marvin got appendicitis. So that was such a big reason why I was optimistic on this team. And that is really what it comes down to. Like, you expected big things there, and it just has not happened. Now, we'll get back to the Kyler chatter in just a minute because there's a lot to discuss there. I think the majority of people have written him off as probably ever playing a game as the Cardinals quarterback again, and we have to talk about that. But I also think that's obviously offensive related. The defense here just hasn't taken that next leap forward. Additionally, another big injury there, Walter Nolan just hasn't really been available. He's only played 100 snaps this year. Their first round pick, I was really optimistic for him. That's been a big deal. Their first round pick from 2024, though, Darius Robinson, I was excited to see him get back there. BJ Ojolari coming off the injury. These guys just have not been anywhere to be found. Their defense has been fine, but it has not taken that big leap forward that you hope to see. It's really just been in moments with the pass rush. You think of that Cowboys game with Josh Sweat and Walter Nolan having an awesome night there. But like Baron Browning hasn't been able to stabilize as any sort of consistent presence. It just, the defense just hasn't taken that leap, man. And that's been frustrating if you're a Cardinals fan. And then you get into the game management, the late game collapses that this Cardinals team, they've had so many moments you can point to where it's like, yeah, they easily should have won that game, and well, maybe not easily, but they definitely should have won that game, and they completely botched it. That's happened like 6 times this year. So it's just been a frustrating year for Arizona. It's obviously lost at this point as they're now, 3-8, right? Just to confirm that. Yeah, 3-8. I mean, they'd have to win out for them to meet my my record prediction on them coming into the year. But I think as we talk about this team moving forward, they are one of the most complicated, hardest teams to know which direction they need to take it out of this season and into 2026 because, man, I don't think this team is that far away. All the close games indicate that this team is right on the cusp of getting there. But I think there's also like a legitimate conversation to be had both about the coach and quarterback and if they should be that pillar of your organization next year. So as far as Kyler is concerned, he's getting a lot of heat. And I know I've been Mr. Kyler Murray defender over the years. So, people are going to call me biased and all that. I'm trying to look at this as objectively as possible. Like, I just do not think Kyler was playing horrible to start the season. Do I think he was playing great? No. I think there were some throws that you look back on the tape and you say, I wish he would make that throw. And yeah, some of those throws are play action, snap your head around, throws that Jacoby Brissett does make. But I do think what he's able to do for the run game, it's not a coincidence that their run game it hasn't just regressed. It has become non-existent since Kyler got hurt. I think you see what he does to open up the run game. And then, of course, what he's able to do in crunch time with the game on the line. Yes, Jacoby's played well, but in a lot of these moments, recently against the Jags and in the Packers game and the Colts game down in the red zone, all of these games have been close, and you get into these situations where things are covered up, you need the quarterback to give you a little bit more. Those are situations where Kyler has had clutch moments and elevated this offense at times. Do I wish he played a little bit better in structure? Are the things that Jacoby does better in the confines of this offense than Kyler? Yes, and I'm totally open to admit that. I think Kyler is probably not too far off of Jacoby in terms of overall quarterback rankings. But I do think he's better. I do think he gives you, on a week-to-week basis, a better ceiling. So for me, like, now that Jacoby, I think, has turned the football over a little bit more, they're not winning games with him. I think if you're having a realistic conversation about Arizona, could they decide we're just going to get a second-round pick for Kyler Murray and move on and just bite the bullet and see what happens next? They could very well decide that. And I don't think it's an irrational thing if they do go that route. But I still look at Kyler, how he played at the start of the season when his receivers were doing him no favors in those games. And they were winning games earlier in the year. It wasn't against good opponents, but they were right in against Seattle. They took care of business against Carolina and New Orleans with Kyler. This idea that he's just so bad that they have to move on from him, I just don't fully understand that. I think what happened was Jacoby stepped in for 3 weeks on a heater and looked incredible, and that made Kyler look worse. Jacoby's since come back to earth. But anyway, so Kyler is clearly like a tier 3 QB making $43 million, which when he got that extension was at the top of the market, but that's not a bad contract for a pretty good quarterback. I think there's a lot of teams in the league that would be licking their chops to get, it would even be less than that because the Cardinals would have to eat some of that. Like, teams would absolutely be willing to give Kyler Murray what would be the equivalent of basically a 3-year, just kind of, loosely terming this, but it'd be about a 3-year, like $70 million contract. Like, he'd be dirt cheap for whoever traded for him. But even if the Cardinals keep him, look, $43 million for Kyler Murray. Just wait till some of these new QB contract extensions start coming in, because Dak's at 60. When Drake May is up, when Caleb's up, when Jaden Daniels is up, CJ Stroud, that's going to be well north of 60. So Kyler's kind of in this like middle-class quarterback contract anyway. I don't know. I don't think it's as obvious as you just dump Kyler Murray and then move forward with Jacoby Brissett. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know that gets you where you need to go if you're Arizona. So for me, I think probably the best thing that could happen if you're a Cardinals fan, at least as far as the QB situation is concerned, is Kyler's able to get back into the lineup for the last month of this season and either plays well and gets you excited again about him, where you can look at this team and say, and you want Kyler to play well with Marvin Harrison specifically. But if that can happen, I do think that's possible, that we get the last month of the year that he kind of sucks everybody back in. You can actually head into the next year like, man, if they can recreate that for the course of the season, you get another year to improve the defense, which on top of that, if we're talking about best case scenario for the Cardinals in a lost season, I would love to see Walter Nolan and Will Johnson out there healthy, balling out, because those two rookies have played on a per-game basis, which is not a lot of games. They've been two of the best-looking defensive rookies in the entire class. They just haven't played that much. If you can get both those guys out there, generate that hype, you can have some real conversations about Arizona next year, surprising some people. That's a best-case scenario. And if I'm a Cardinals fan, I'm totally happy with that. Now, it's also like, I don't know necessarily how to word this, but it might be a relief if you go back to Kyler and he really does just struggle. And it's so clear that he's not a fit. And I know some people think that's where they're at with this, and that's fine. I'm not quite there yet. I think we need to see a little bit more there before you completely write off Kyler. But it might be a breath of fresh air to just be like, yep, it's clear. It is clear as day. This team is better with Jacoby Brissett. We're going to move on from Kyler, get what we can get from him, and we'll build from there. That's also a breath of fresh air. I think what you don't want is the wishy-washy, inconsistent play where it's one good game, one mid game, that kind of deal. Get some clarity if and when Kyler comes back this season on that. And then, I don't know that how Arizona plays the rest of the year is going to give you an answer on Jonathan Gannon. So, in my heart of hearts, I just don't think this team is going to fire Jonathan Gannon. I don't think he's done a good job this year, though, and it wouldn't be a huge surprise if they did. So that's another thing that we'll figure out as the year goes on. But they are certainly in an interesting spot. But I just will wrap by saying I really don't they're interesting because it's challenging. Some teams it's tear it apart. It's obvious. I don't think it's that obvious. I think this team is very close, and they have to be careful with how they proceed. I can see this being a 10 or 11 win playoff team next year with Jonathan Gannon or Kyler Murray if they hit some green lights and things go right. But let's go to our next team here. The 24th ranked Cincinnati Bengals, a team that I ranked 15th heading into the year. I predicted they would go 10-7, be a wild card team that's all offense under Joe Burrow and no defense. And then obviously Joe Burrow goes down, which makes the predictions kind of meaningless. I will say I had them as the 31st ranked defense, and I was wrong. This is a historically pathetic defense. This didn't deserve to rank as a number 32 defense, and I'm not even kidding. I think in their state, Ohio State could probably step in and play better defense than the Bengals do, and they probably have more pro talent than the Bengals have right now. So I don't think that's crazy to say that Ohio State would literally have a better pro defense than the Bengals. They are that bad. Shamar Stewart, their first-round draft pick, as anticipated based on his profile, not ready to step in and make an impact. They're starting 2 rookie linebackers. Horrible process by the Bengals in the modern NFL to trot 2 rookie linebackers out there. And not first-round surefire guys either. You're talking about Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter should not be starting, especially. But, if you were going to start Knight, I would say put him next to a veteran linebacker I don't know, Jermaine Pratt or Logan Wilson. Interesting. Where'd those guys go? The safety room needs improvement. Trey Hendrickson's been injured, and I don't want to speculate, but I think probably not playing, especially because they didn't pay him. I don't know. I don't want to go too far down that path, but feels like he maybe would be itching to get out there a little bit more if the Bengals didn't leave him hanging on the contract. I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention one positive on the Bengals is that DJ Turner has turned into an absolute superstar cornerback, and they've at least got one thing to go right with that defense. I would hate to see, with Trey Hendrickson out for this defense, I would hate to see what this defense would be looking like right now, if not for DJ Turner, because they're already so bad. But he has single-handedly ended drives and even kept some games competitive at times. Now, the one thing they did kind of get right mid-season here was the Joe Flacco trade. He actually stepped in and played really well to the point that at the end of the day, I just don't know how much it would have mattered if Burrow was healthy all year. I don't even know if this team would have been a 10-7 football team because they've lost games 38-42 anyway. When Burrow, we saw that last year, right? That one Ravens game comes to mind. Did they lose both those games against the Ravens? Giving up 38 points. That's what my memory's telling me. But I think you get the point. Burrow got hurt, but this team was always going to be in for a frustrating season one way or another. So as far as what the rest of this year, what constitutes success for the Bengals, for me, honestly, it's just don't let Joe Burrow get hurt again, or don't rush this turf toe thing and screw this up in classic Bengals fashion. At least get through the year knowing Joe Burrow is going to be good to go next year is what I'm saying. Because unfortunately with Burrow, he has just had a hard time staying healthy. But other than that, it's hard to find positive things to say about the Bengals. I mean, obviously, if if you could see some of these rookie defenders look more ready to make an impact next year, that would be great. I think there's one really fun player on the offense right now that deserves more run, Mitchell Tinsley. If Burrow gets back here, I think Tinsley could really seriously emerge as a high-end number 3 wide receiver. Think of him can he become Jacoby Myers, who was an undrafted free agent, not a ton of speed, but inside-out flexibility, can make some really tough catches, smart, crafty guy, the perfect complement to Chase and Higgins because he can play inside and out. If you want Chase in the slot, you can put Tinsley outside, vice versa. So that's a player I would love to see get more run here. I think I've had enough Andre Iosivas in the wide receiver 3 role. Let's let Mitchell Tinsley cook the rest of the year. But then the last thing I wrote down on this Bengals team is are we seriously just so defeated by this organization that we're just going to get to the end of the year and we're just all signed up for another Zach Taylor year? Talk about a coach that I think we all know is a dud. But does the organization have any interest in being proactive about this? You could literally reunite Joe Burrow with Joe Brady right now. You could go get a Chris Shula to turn this defense around overnight. But instead, you're just going to have the guy that is carried by Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. Okay, I guess that's where we're at if you're the Bengals, but I don't have anything else for Cincinnati. It's a defeating conversation with this team when you're talking about a front office and an ownership group that so consistently leaves this team behind the 8 ball, and then you pile the Joe Burrow injury on top of it, and it just becomes a very exhausting, frustrating conversation, unfortunately. And I know Bengals fans have had that conversation countless times to this date. But let's go ahead and move forward to the Atlanta Falcons, who rank currently number 23 for me, coming off a win against New Orleans. Good for you. They took care of the Saints. I will say it was good to see not just Kirk Cousins, but someone that's also had a really bad year in Darnell Mooney. Those guys had a great week. They bounce back. They get a win. Feel-good week for Atlanta. It's still a very inconsistent, middling football team at the end of the day. And I'm going to be honest. I really wish I didn't apologize for being wrong about the Falcons after 4 weeks of the season, because they did have a little bit of a fun run there, man. They beat the Bills. They had a big win on primetime against the Vikings that, in hindsight, maybe wasn't as impressive as we thought at the time. I really thought Raheem Morris with Jeff Ulbrich was getting this defense to play better. I thought offensively earlier in the year they showed some creative wrinkles that were getting some things going. It has completely disappeared pretty much from the moment I issued my apology. And now looking at things, this team ranks exactly where I had them heading into the year. I predicted a 7-10 season on the Falcons, and I got a lot of heat from that. A lot of people said I was too low on Atlanta. And I would say, looking back on my prediction for this team this season, I think I nailed it, exactly how this team's season was going to go. I think I had questions about the defense. I figured they could do some fun stuff with the pass rush. I even talked about how they want to replicate that Rams system that was kind of expanded upon after Raheem Morris left the Rams. But clearly, when you look at how light their front was, the players they had invested in, these hybrid edge linebackers, Jalen Walker, getting lighter with their interior D-line. You look at what they did at the end of last year, which was an identical system to what the Rams were doing with twists and stunts with those 3-4 style fronts. It was so clear, they were going to go after that Chris Shula system. And they've replicated some of that success. They've had a lot of good stunts and twists and some games where the pass rush is working. They brought in these athletes, on the edge. Some of these interior guys have had their flashes. And that's led to some weeks where their pass defense has been okay. Outside of that, though, the run defense has been a mess. which was a huge question I had on this team when they let Nate Landman just walk to the Rams, running the same system. The Rams were like, really? You're just gonna let that guy go? That guy? The crazy run defender that's like the perfect linebacker to put behind an undersized front? Okay, yeah, we'll bring him here and make him a team captain and extend him like a month later. They let Landman go. They cut Grady Jarrett. They draft 2 edge rushers that don't profile as high as and run defenders. I think Jalen Walker's doing a good job getting in there against the run, but you knew James Pierce Jr. was not drafted to help their run defense. And there's been games where this defense has just been gashed against the run. So they've been very hit or miss defensively. And then offensively, I was relatively lukewarm on Penix. I think there was a lot of flashes last year, but the concerns about accuracy and consistency and pocket presence all have been issues for him. I still get so frustrated watching him because I wish he would use his legs more, but there's just no creativity for him. You're left with a guy that might scramble like every other week, and when he does scramble, he looks really good at it, but he's someone that is a pocket passer, realistically speaking, that is young in his processing ability. There's a lot of missed reads and coulda, shoulda, woulda on his tape. He's not particularly accurate. He can throw dimes, but he misses a lot of throws. And then you got the injury stuff on top of it, which is unfortunately surfaced. So, I just didn't have like overwhelming belief in Michael Penix. I think lukewarm on him is the way to put it. Cautiously optimistic, but not glowing with optimism. And I think that's still kind of where we're at with Penix. There's been some good games. I don't think you'll just write him off yet. The injury is definitely concerning, but there's a lot of play from him where you're like, man, I just don't know if he's the guy after 2 years. This season is cooked. It's, they're a long shot for this division. I mean, if the Bucs and Panthers fall apart, they maybe 9-8 if the Falcons just go on this crazy run. I mean, that's a dream, though. That's not a realistic statement for the Falcons after all you did was beat the Saints. For me, success for this team is that this ownership group can get real. Do what the Commanders didn't. Not that they had anything close to the same season, but be realistic about where this team is at and look at the coach and the general manager and understand this just isn't good enough. Is Raheem Morris a train wreck head coach? Maybe, but probably not. But is he ever going to be anything better than like Sean McDermott? No. Like, he's not a defensive guru. He's an okay defensive coach, and I think someone that the players probably like, but his game management isn't even that good. Like, he's just not an ideal head coach. And you are in a window here where you can build yourself out of that, have a transition year next year with Penix maybe not even fully healthy to start the year. You don't have a first round pick. You're going to have to retool this team. Give the head coach a head start on the next year. And the GM, I'm sorry, Terry Fontenot, he's been one of the worst in the league since he got hired. Admittedly, this year's class, though they were aggressive to give up their first round pick, and that's a big part of this, right? You can't give a top 10 pick to your former team if you're Raheem Morris, have the year you've had and not get serious criticism for it that potentially costs you your job. But I do like the edge rush tandem that they walked out with Walker and Pierce, and they did hit on Xavier Watts in the third round. And we'll see about Billy Bowman. He's made some plays this year too. But, man, you go back to the last few drafts, 2024, you get Michael Penix in the 8th round, at the 8th overall pick. We just talked about that. But Ruka Rororo, they traded up to get him at 35. I hated that move. he's been an athlete in this system that's made a couple plays off of stunts, but he hasn't stopped the run and he hasn't been winning one-on-one reps. You do not make that move again. Braylon Trice at the top of the third round has given you nothing. Brandon Dorlus, same deal. Athletic hybrid end that hasn't made an impact here. Nothing in that draft class on day 3. Then you go to 2023. It's a little better, right? You take Bijan. He's turned into the God mode running back that you expected him to be, but it's not that hard to just draft Bijan Robinson with the 8th pick. They took Matthew Bergeron. He's a good run blocker, bad pass blocker. He's an okay player. Zach Harrison here in year 3 has turned into a nice defensive tackle. But then day 3, you're looking at Clark Phillips, nothing. DeMarco Helms, decent role player, I guess. And then Javon Gwynn, bad pick. So nothing on day 3. 2022, they take Drake London, great pick. But then Arnold Ebiketie with the 38th overall pick has not lived up to that potential. Troy Anderson in the 2nd round as well, not starting at linebacker for you in year 3. They take Desmond Ridder at the top of the 3rd round. I always hated that pick because of his lack of potential, that you were basically going to waste time for a year and a half because he's probably going to have some okay moments that you waste your time seeing what he's got. 3rd round pick on D'Angelo Malone. Like, are you kidding me? And then they did get Tyler Algier in the 5th round of that draft, but and he was 2021 too, right? He wasn't his first pick, Kyle Pitts. I'm just confirming this on the fly here. Yeah, so he was 2021 as well. The Kyle Pitts pick has not been worth it with the 4th overall pick. They took him over Jamar Chase and Penei Sewell, you guys. And I loved Kyle Pitts as a prospect. I don't think it was the most egregious pick, but I like to think I probably would have taken Jamar Chase or Penei Sewell instead. I'd have to go back and see what I said about it. I know I didn't hate the pick necessarily. But then, okay, you go Richie Grant in the 2nd round. He's a backup on another team now. He was horrible for them. Jalen Mayfield in the 3rd round was a guard who sucked. He was one of the worst guards I've seen in years. Darren Hall, 4th round pick corner, didn't work out for you. Drew Dahlman in the 4th round, great hit, and you let him go. And he's playing even better for the Bears this year. And then it's a mess after that. I mean, just the draft alone has been horrible for the Falcons. Just signing Jesse Bates is not enough to save your job. They have problem with their wide receiver depth. They have problem with their offensive line depth. The D-line, the linebacker, the defense has not been good. It's so bad. So if anything else, Terry Fontenot has to go. But that's another reason why I think you just move on from Raheem Morris. Bring in this natural window where you get a new coach, a new GM. They get a full year, a full transition year to get a look at Penix, feel out the roster, develop the system, and then maybe in 2027, when you get a 1st round pick again, you can think about QB or what needs to be done there. But anyway, that was a tangent, and that to me is success. Is you have an organization that's willing to make that change with the new coach and the new GM. Then at number 22, moving on to the next team here, the Miami Dolphins. Had them ranked 24th coming into the year, predicted they go 6-11. I would say this is spot on with how I expected the Dolphins season to go, where I never thought Tua should have been their long-term guy. Never was a fan of that extension. It had reached a point where he had played well enough for about a year and a half where it was like, you can stomach it, but it was always concerning. And this year, it's become further evident, right, that they're going to need a new quarterback at some point. Tua he's a Derek Carr tier 4 quarterback. He can have some good games for you, but you're never going to trust him to go the distance with. To get 4 good games against playoff opponents from Tua, forget it. It's not going to happen at this point. It's never going to happen. So you know, heading into it with that contract, it was always a tough, it was going to be a tough year because you couldn't really get out of Tua. Maybe this offseason there's a chance for that, but that's gone about as expected. And then I would say the main objective for the Dolphins was like, just show some flashes that you can become a more physical minded football team. And to be fair, that's actually happened this year. Their run defense has settled down recently after a rough start, but I think two of their main investments in the draft, Kenneth Grant and Jordan Phillips, getting some beef on the interior of the D-line, they're looking like good picks. You know, Kenneth Grant has a long way to go, but he has gone from an issue against the run to start the season to I think he's starting to play more physical and adjust to NFL competition. And then Jordan Phillips, 4th round pick, was always kind of a stocky run defender. He's been a nice steady player for them. So you've added that. Jordan Brooks has taken a huge leap as their linebacker. He's playing at at a Pro Bowl level this year. I really have come around on Jordan Brooks. I think he's playing at an even better level than he ever has. And then at least like with the offensive line, you're hitting a couple of green lights. I think Patrick Paul has been adequate at, basically his rookie year, took a redshirt year as a 2nd round pick out of Houston last year. But, I think he's been adequate. And then Aaron Brewer, their center, has been phenomenal to watch. He brings an it factor to them in the run game, and he's bulked up a little bit. He's no longer this 280-pound meme at center, where he was always an athletic run blocker, but he's beefed up and he's continued to be an athlete in the run game. So they're hitting some green lights on the O-line. You need to see a further leap from Suamataia, who's been a disaster. Not Suamataia, that's the Chiefs guy. The 2nd round pick here was, oh my goodness, this is driving me crazy. I'm just pulling it up right now real quick. Jonas Avonaya. They gave it 3 picks to go get this guy, and he's been one of the worst linemen in the league. But overall, you're hitting at least a couple green lights with the O-line, and then Ollie Gordon's been exactly what they needed as a running back. So, honestly, I know there's like doom and gloom with the Dolphins. There's a lot of like fire Mike McDaniel talk. That's my biggest take on this team is like, this isn't the time. I think you fired Chris Greer. That was the right call. He is well outstayed his welcome. There's some aspects of this draft, as we mentioned, that are looking okay. But overall, I mean, you are also talking about trading 3 picks for Savanaia, who looks like even an extension of unplayable. Like he looks like he doesn't belong in college football, let alone the NFL. But even if you have some hits in the draft class, that's mixed in there. But I think moving on from him was a huge win for the Dolphins this year. Excited to see who they get for their GM. But I just think the offense continues to overachieve. They're working around Tua. They're playing hard for Mike McDaniel and really have been. I just don't understand why fire McDaniel now. Are you really going to get an upgrade on this team? I don't think so. I would definitely give him another year. But overall, I would say the Dolphins season has gone right according to the scripted prediction from me there. And then at number 21, the Minnesota Vikings, falling down a spot in the rankings and falling out of the kind of playoff fringe tier, by the way. I'm out on the Vikings playoff hopes this year. Like, if it wasn't already toast after the Ravens game, it certainly was this week. So I had them 11th coming into the year. But to be fair, I use a formula for the Vikings, for my deep dive power rankings. And on paper, when you plug in O-line, pass rush, coaching, weapons, running back, linebacker, you name it, like the Vikings were going to come out well in that formula. But they're unique in the sense that I don't remember a team that had one of the more like championship ready rosters on paper, at least going into the year, yet as big of an uncertainty at QB. And even in my formula, despite you know, having JJ McCarthy as the 29th ranked quarterback in this series, the Vikings still came out as the 11th overall team. The problem is I had JJ McCarthy too high, and that was at 29. I mean, if you want to get nitty gritty, I think I had a 70 rating on him or a 69 rating. JJ McCarthy's playing like he belongs in the 50s for an overall rating. Like, he has been, bar none, the worst quarterback in the NFL this year. It's been a colossal disaster from his perspective. And it sucks to just boil it down to JJ McCarthy, but 90% of it is just that. Now, yeah, the offensive line has certainly not been as good as I expected, and that's not helping JJ. Ryan Kelly's been hurt. Darrisaw, I don't think is 100%. They've been missing a lot of guys scattered throughout courses of the season. But, since JJ came back, since the Lions victory, the offensive line has been much more practical. And you're really getting to see that it is JJ McCarthy is the primary issue here. The processing is slow. When he does see it, a lot of times he's sailing throws. He's had bad mistakes that lead to interceptions. He's not using his legs to extend plays very well. It's a mess. It is Zach Wilson type of rookie quarterback play. It is Sam Darnold type of rookie quarterback play. And maybe he gets there eventually, but he's clearly not there right now. And this team screwed up, man. I questioned if they should have brought Sam Darnold back. I questioned if they should have signed Aaron Rodgers. But even down to you could have given Daniel Jones an extension to compete with JJ and at least have somebody else. They could have at least done that. They did none of it. They just were all in on JJ McCarthy being good. And it completely exploded in their face. And I think that, and hindsight is 2020, right? I think what happened with Darnold at the end of last year is it was a reasonable decision for them to say, you know what? Sam did great things for us, but we think this is a quarterback that when he goes against playoff defenses is going to crumble, is going to make mistakes. And to be fair, we just saw Sam Darnold do that a week ago against the Rams. I think it was a reasonable decision, but for the backup plan to be this guy, it's just not the right look, right? If you're going to have so much confidence in the guy that threw the ball 10 times a game at Michigan, that's the youngest quarterback in the NFL, based on a preseason game that wasn't even perfect, and some practice and what he does in the film room, that's an unbelievable amount of confidence based on how he's playing right now. The math ain't math in there. You had to know to some degree that this guy was not going to be ready. And they just didn't. They put all their chips on the table, and they had, I'm not a big poker guy, but they had in their hand, a 2 of spades and a 6 diamond. Maybe that's a bad poker reference, but they called the tables bluff, and they had nothing, is how the Vikings play this. And this has a chance. We're still going to see this develop. It's looking really bad for JJ. He still has time to play better. And even Sam Darnold, it's been a half of a season of incredible play. And, if he keeps getting to the playoffs and looking like that guy, you at least there's something there that you were betting against. So again, we're still going to get to see this play out. But, having grown up in Minnesota, this reminds me of when they let Kevin Garnett go and you watch him win championships on the Celtics. You let David Ortiz go and he's winning championships on the Red Sox. And you're thinking about this for 20, 30 years. How did the team screw that up? It's possible that that's where this goes. Obviously, though, if we're talking about where I was right, where I was wrong on this team, it's just one of those unique teams where the analysis on the Vikings was always, it's going to come down to JJ McCarthy. It's exactly what's happened. It's just when you're talking about trying to predict how that happens in tandem with a really good roster, yeah, they ended up ranking pretty high, and that looks like crap right now. And it just kind of is what it is. So if we talk about the rest of the year for the Vikings, obviously, they need JJ McCarthy to play better. You need to head into next year feeling like he can be a starting quarterback for you. Like, you don't want to come out of this season, if you're the Vikings, like, what do we do? Do we need to draft another guy? Do we need to go sign like Jacoby Brissett? Like, do we need to go back to that category of QB? Maybe Kyler Murray becomes available, which I will say, like, don't hate that idea. But it's pretty crazy how big of a disaster it's been with McCarthy. Another alternate successful story here, I'll continue to tease this because I teased it in the Vikings deep dive, where Max Brosmer might get to start this week if JJ McCarthy has a concussion. And I said in the Vikings deep dive, I'm not predicting that this happens, but there's a lot of Brock Purdy in Brock Brosmer's game, and there's a lot of Trey Lance in JJ McCarthy's QB evaluation. And I drew some parallels to that situation in San Francisco. Obviously, with Trey Lance being the highly drafted guy, Brock Purdy being Mr. Irrelevant, essentially the same deal here. It could happen. It might be a 10% chance that it happens, but it could. That Max Brosmer steps in and you found somebody out of nowhere, a Brock Purdy type of QB that maybe could save this team's ass. We're a long way from there, but at least need to tease it again. So the Vikings come in at 21, and this season is over, and it's all about JJ just playing better. Let's go to my number 20 team, the Carolina Panthers. So I had them ranked 28th coming into this season. I predicted a 6-11 season for them. And as frustrating as this team is, they are at least better than that. Now, to be fair, I predicted them 6-11. They, coming up, have to play the Rams, at the Saints, who they did lose to just a few weeks ago, Tampa Bay twice, and Seattle. They could still lose out and finish 6-11, and we were spot on with the record prediction. But I do think this team has climbed out of at least that cellar dweller situation where I had them 28th coming into the year, and that's at least good for Carolina, coming off of, I'm recording this the day after they lose to the Niners and disappoint everybody, really, I think, because they could have taken first place in the division there. But I think the main difference with where I had them ranked and how they're playing is the defense. I had them ranked as the 29th overall defense, and they've settled in as a better unit than that. Ejiro Evero deserves a ton of credit there. Now, they're not perfect. They've had some stinker games defensively, but a lot more games of good defense than bad defense. They come out ranked 21st overall for defensive DVOA, which is already better than the 29th ranked defense that I had on them coming into the year. But in their wins, they've actually been dominant. They have held opponents to 16.2 points in the 6 games that the Panthers have won. So they've had some really high highs with their defense. And, 3 key additions getting, J.C. Horn played most of last season, so he's not an addition, but 2 key additions to this unit. Derek Brown, who's a great freaking player. He's best player on this team, in my opinion, although J.C. Horn's coming for that title. But anyway, he's completely elevated their run defense, as you would expect. Derek Brown is able to do, and he's given a little bit as a pass rusher, not a lot of it, but definitely what he's able to do with their run defense, on top of Trayvon Merrick, who's been everything they needed with speed and tackling consistency from the second level. Really good job by this front office to locate the biggest issue for this defense of many. But the biggest problem, I think, watching the Panthers last year was guys get into the second level, and then it's like off to the races. And it's just this porous defense at the second and third level. Trayvon Merrick, not the perfect coverage player, but man, he can run and tackle. And he has done that for them. So those have been some big additions. And then J.C. Horn has been phenomenal this year. He has had, I think, probably 2 of the 3 most insane interceptions that I've seen this year. I think it was Jalen Hawkins for the Patriots had that one-handed pick. Stingley's had some good picks too, but I mean, seriously, J.C. Horn had that beautiful interception against the Jets. I mean, he had 2 interceptions against the Jets. One was a one-handed interception. Another one was just like textbook press coverage down the sideline. But he had a recovery one-handed pick that was just insane that helped them win the game against the Jets. And then the play he made against Brock Purdy Monday night, reading a dig route from the backside cover 3 assignment. You never see that guy leave that zone where he's on the outside third and coming from the opposite side of the field, the receiver's running a dig route and he breaks he crosses beyond the middle of the field and comes from the backside and picks that thing off. Like, I can't even blame Brock Purdy for that pick. Like, you don't expect that guy to make that play. So J.C. Horn's been awesome. And then like some of these young guys, Trevin Wallace didn't play this week against the Niners, but he's starting to develop here as a young linebacker. Nick Scorton's been a great addition in the second round. So they've got a better talent base, some guys coming along. And then, yeah, I think Ejiro Evero's just kind of getting his reputation back as one of these ascending defensive minds. So that's helped this team be a lot more competitive. But I would say the offense has just been incredibly frustrating and inconsistent, which is probably on brand with how it was discussed on this team coming into the year. It's a bummer that things haven't clicked more. You know, it's crazy because like they have an offensive line. I like their receivers. I think against the Niners, T-Mac, and at some points throughout the season, T-Mac has had some drops, but overall, he looks every bit the number 1 wide receiver that they drafted him to be. But yeah, like I like their weapons. I like their playmakers for the most part, but it's just it's ironic, you know, because they're kind of remembered for beating the Packers a few weeks ago. And that being their big signature win, but it's kind of ironic because they remind me a lot of like a poor man's Packers team where they just can't seem to play consistent complementary football on offense. And it's like as soon as one thing feels like it's fixed, another issue pops up. It's like a cartoon bit of someone trying to fix like a car engine. The second you fix it over here, another gasket blows over there, or what, you know, like that's what reminds me with this Panthers offense where, okay, the run game's working. That's the week Bryce Young can't hit the broadside of a barn and makes a bunch of stupid mistakes. Things are starting to work. Oh, sorry, you just had 3 straight drives killed by false starts and, you know, a receiver running the wrong route or the drops or just random miscommunications. It's just so many frustrating aspects to this Panthers offense that have held them back and that leave them, yes, a competitive 6-7 football team, but as my 20th ranked team and outside of the playoff tier. And overall, I don't think that's a horrible outlook on the Panthers. You know, obviously I had them ranked 28th coming in the year. So for them to kind of climb out of that bottom tier, be creeping up into the right direction, it's still overall a good thing. And everything we said about the defense settling down is really a good thing. But it does sting a little bit more when like Bryce he just doesn't feel like he's it, right? And it's tough because I don't think it's all his fault. I really don't. But he's obviously a part of the problem. And he's had some games where he's just so bad. But he's had good games too, right? So that's where it gets so frustrating with Bryce. And I think that you wanted, if the Panthers were going to have a good year, if you told them they were going to go 8-9 before the year started, you would take that if you're a Panthers fan. But you would also assume that Bryce is getting better and gave you more of those flashes of what we saw. I mean, the second half of last year's Bryce Young is by far the best stretch of football Bryce has played. We've gotten nothing close to that as far as any sustained period of time. You know, I think you look at the Falcons game last week, Bryce played like that guy, but that's, you know, few and far between. He's largely just felt like this Alex Smithian figure. I just keep coming back to that, where he just doesn't have the tools to get you all that excited. And just like when the Chiefs had Alex Smith, you can keep building up the team, you can keep trying to compete and keep maybe going in the right direction, but eventually you're going to want to take that flyer on a Patrick Mahomes. And I think if you're the Panthers, your eyes are peeled. I don't think they draft a quarterback this year. Unless it's, like a Lenoris Sellers on day 2, like maybe. But also, like, I think of like what the Eagles were able to do when they had Carson Wentz and then they drafted Hurts. I think you're probably keeping your eyes peeled if you're moving forward at this point, if you're the Panthers. But like I said, it's not all bad. I think for me, success on this team for the rest of the year is they win 8 or 9 games with a tough schedule. So you finish 2-3 or 3-2. And if you could just get 2 games in a row where Bryce plays like he did at the end of last year and just get you a little bit more excited for next year, I think that's a success with where the Panthers are at right now. I think after you lose that game to the Niners, expecting this team to be a playoff caliber team, it's just not realistic. And that's just to get into the playoffs. Like, sure, maybe the Bucs completely self-combust and you sneak in as a 9-8 team in the NFC South. This team's not going on a run in the playoffs. Like, come on now. They're just not there yet. But maybe in a year or two, they can keep building up that way. Also, I didn't put this in my notes, but another thing that constitutes success for this team is if Dave Canales can get this team to clean up the penalties and the pre-snap mistakes and the miscommunications. This team just does not play sharp. They're not a mentally sharp football team. Can we get whatever that objective assessment is or subjective assessment is of this team? Can we come out of the year and they clean that up? That would make me feel better about the Panthers too. All right, at number 19, I probably got to pick up the pace a little bit because otherwise we're going to be here for 4.5 hours, which is, I guess, par for the course on what we did for the show last year. But the Jaguars at number 19. So they get the win against Arizona in a roller coaster day. They do fall down 1 spot in the power rankings to number 19. That is largely because we're going to be talking about the Cowboys later, who are jumping them. I don't really feel any different about the Jags here this week. As we look at my preview on them, I was wrong about the Jags. I was dead wrong. I had them 25th in my power rankings, but more importantly, I had them as a 5-12 football team. I thought this was going to be a team that's a year away. Just so much turnover, a lot of youth, you name it. And they've been so much more prepared to win football games than I expected this year. And I think Liam Cohen deserves a ton of credit for stepping in and doing an excellent job here. And the 2 areas of this team especially where I was wrong about, number 1 is their run game has shattered expectations. So I had them ranked as my 29th run game heading into the year. They're 9th in run game DVOA. This offensive line is athletic. Liam Cohen has these guys on the same page. They have a synergetic blocking system that works well for these guys to understand what they're doing, and it works well with these explosive running backs, Etienne and Tootin. They attack the perimeter really well. So far gone from the Doug Peterson run schemes that felt like he had all these plays that he wanted to call that didn't really make sense together, and the offensive line just didn't really understand what their assignments were on these plays. I spent a lot of time complaining about Doug Peterson's run scheme. It's been the complete opposite with Liam Cohen. It just makes sense. And it's working. So they've shattered expectations there. And then the defense has been much more competent than I expected. I had them ranked as the 24th overall defense coming into the year. They're like top half. They're 14th in DVOA. They've had some really good games on defense. And they play good physical team defense. Josh Hines-Allen has been kind of the superstar that's returned to superstardom, which makes a difference. And then everybody else is just kind of filling in, playing nice, having good seasons. And Anthony Campanelli has those guys playing well on that side of the ball. So they're a competitive squad, right? They're sitting here at 7-4. They have a chance to make the playoffs. Now, it's not all positive. There's a lot of questions about the Jaguars' passing game, Trevor Lawrence. It just really feels like he is what he is at this point, which is a wildly erratic, inconsistent freak at the quarterback position. Play to play, drive to drive, game to game. You just have no idea what you're going to get from Trevor Lawrence. And unfortunately, that just has not changed at all this year. And then also, like, really not great to see Brian Thomas Jr. take the step back that he did. Like, he was supposed to be a signature building block for this team. I mean, there were people questioning if he was the best wide receiver out of that draft class that had, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison, Rome Odunze, Vlad McConkey. Like, that's where Brian Thomas was at coming out of last year, and he's been one of the worst receivers in the league this year. Just can't catch a cold. Definitely want to see those things clear up as the season moves on and into next year if you want to start to take this team really seriously about taking that next step. But they are kind of this like playoff fringe team. And I think at this point, I was going to say before I checked, I was going to say like this season's already been a success. And it doesn't really matter how they finish the season if you want to be realistic about it. However, when you look at their schedule and what they've already accomplished, I think they've cleared the mark that I think you're really disappointed and have to kind of leave the season with a bad taste in your mouth if they don't make the playoffs at this point. Because, and I know it sounds crazy to say that, but they play the Titans twice and the Jets. You're disappointed if they lose any of those games. That would get them to 10 wins. And then can they just win one game against the Colts, who they play twice, or Denver? And that would get you to 11 wins, which should get you into the playoffs. You also have the tiebreaker over the Chiefs. So I think at this point, success for the Jags is to make the playoffs. Now, overall, I think you got the right coach. You got the right defensive coordinator. This has all been without Travis Hunter, who they invested everything in. You get that piece back next year. Like, you're probably going to be pretty excited for next year one way or another. But I do think it'd be pretty disappointing at this point if you do not make the playoffs. All right, number 18, the Pittsburgh Steelers. This one can be short. We can probably save some time here. I had them ranked 18th coming into the year. I have them ranked 18th right now. I've had them ranked 18th for 5 freaking years, it feels like. This has been exactly what you thought was going to happen with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I will say the defense has been extremely frustrating relative to expectations. It felt like they had turned a corner the last month, and then this week happened against the Bears, and it went right back to that porous, like in the first 2 months of the year, you watch the Steelers and it's like, why does it feel like they have this vacant hole in the entire middle of their defense? Like, nobody's making plays from the linebacker or safety position. Ben Johnson and Caleb Johnson, I just respect Ben Johnson so much because he's such a great play caller. This week, it's like, oh, we are running dig routes right into the teeth of their defense, and they're doing nothing to take them away. I'm just going to keep doing that. And Caleb, just keep throwing it. And They had so much success there. And that was with Caleb trying to throw the ball to two defenders in that game. The Steelers dropped picks. But, man, the lack of adjustments from this Mike Tomlin, Terrell Austin defense is pretty crazy. So I will say there's been more defensive frustrations than I think you expected for this team. But overall, like, you didn't think this offense was going to be flawless. I would say the Aaron Rodgers of it all has gone almost exactly as you expected, where he's been fine. Some games better than others. They're running a very throwback Arthur Smith style offense. I think Darnell Washington's been super fun. DK Metcalf's been really good here. Jalen Warren's been awesome. They've had some good things happen with the offense. It doesn't have to be this completely negative conversation on the Steelers. But you knew there were going to be some limitations with Rodgers, and now he's banged up, which is another concern with Rodgers. Now, like I said, I had them going 10-7, sneaking into the playoffs. We'll see where this goes. They are currently 6-5. Their upcoming schedule is not easy. I think they have 2 games that they should be able to get, which is Miami and Cleveland. I think they can get to 8 there, but they have 2 games against Baltimore. They have to go to Detroit, and they have to beat Buffalo. So you're asking them to go 2-2 in those if you're going to get to 10-7. I don't know that that's going to happen. I will just say this. As we transition out of this Steelers conversation, success for this team literally, to me, boils down to how they play against the Baltimore Ravens, because that's your path in, is to win this division. And the Ravens have not lost in 5 weeks, but you have the same record right now. So obviously you have to take care of business against Miami and Cleveland. But yeah, success for them is how they play the Ravens. And maybe they might even have to sweep the Ravens. It's not going to be easy to do. But I think this team has to make the playoffs to constitute success. I don't think they have to go beyond that. But that's about it. And then you get into all the existential questions about the Steelers quarterback room and are they an eternally 9-8 team? The exhausting conversation we have about the Steelers every single year. But we don't need to have that here today because it's the same as it's always been. Let's go to my number 17 ranked team here. And it's actually the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who fall 5 spots in the rankings. And more importantly, they fall out of that tier 2 of teams, out of your true playoff caliber teams, down to more playoff fringe caliber teams. And the Bucs are one of these injury-riddled teams that when you deal with as many injuries as they have, the prediction on these teams can be a little bit more useless to try to compare and contrast. Because yes, if you told me that they were going to lose Cody Mock, Chris Godwin was basically not going to play all year, Mike Evans was basically not going to play all year, Bucky Irving was basically not going to play all year, on defense, they were going to lose. Well, and not to mention, Wirfs was going to miss the first 4 games, and then Luke Gedeke was going to miss the next 4 games after that. And then also on defense, your best pass rusher in Kalijah Kancey was going to go down. I wouldn't have ranked them 6th heading into the year as I did. And that's where I had them heading into the year. But I also think earlier in the year, they showed some of those high-end flashes. So much so that there were points earlier in the season that Bucs fans were pissed at me for not ranking them higher in my power rankings. Well, since that point in time, they've obviously shown some issues. I'd always said, look, man, Baker's balling out. They're making plays when they need them, but there's a lot of instability going on here. The underlying metrics were not that great on the Bucs, and it's caught up with them against some really good opponents. And right now, they're in a tough spot. I mean, luckily their division is very winnable, but God, if they were in the NFC West or the NFC North or the AFC East, I don't think you're talking about the Bucs as a playoff team right now. No way. So their narrative is helped by the division that they're in, but they're in a tough spot right now. There's no way around it. But again, all the injuries make comparing and contrasting my predictions on them coming into the year kind of moot, because this is not the same Bucs team that I analyzed. So I think the best we can do with the Bucs is look at where they're at right now and ask moving forward, what does constitute success for this Bucs team? Is it the case that the injuries are just so bad that it doesn't even matter if this team makes the playoffs? You get that excuse no matter what? Or is there a line where, no, they should still accomplish a certain amount of success this year? And I think it is the former there. Like, I look at their schedule. They've had 3 really tough games in a row. They now get Arizona, New Orleans, Atlanta, Carolina, Miami, Carolina. I mean, dude, you got to at least win 4 out of 6, which would put you at 10-7, which was actually my record prediction on them before the season started. Ironically, I think you have to do that at least. Now, from that point on, it's just going to come down to like, how healthy can these receivers get? Can you get Bucky Irving back? Which there's a lot of noise about when he's going to come back. I still think if you could tell me they get to the end of the year, they're a 10 or 11 win team, they get a home playoff game, and you're going to head into the first week of the playoffs, and Godwin's going to be healthy because they've been very patient with him, and Mike Evans is going to be healthy because it was a collarbone injury. He should be back to full strength. And then, you got Ibuka in the mix there. You get Bucky. If you tell me Bucky Irving's going to be back, if you can guarantee me those things, this team should win a playoff game. I think that would be disappointing if those injuries go, if you get green lights with those injuries and you don't win a playoff game. I think that would be disappointing. But there's just no guarantees with any of this stuff. So I think at the bare minimum, you should be able to take care of inferior opponents and get in. But then depending on how healthy they are, I think that discussion changes. I will say this. If this team really gets roaring, if they win 5 out of 6, which I think is very possible with that schedule, it's a joke of a schedule the rest of the way, and you get those guys back healthy, and you get to the playoffs, and you're like cooking. Like, I know it's doom and gloom right now for the Bucs, and they're -5 in the rankings, and it doesn't feel great right now. They can absolutely turn this thing around. The season is not lost. If they start cooking and they're scoring 30 points a week and these receivers are healthy and you get to the playoffs feeling good, if this defense lets you down in the playoffs, let's say they have to play Green Bay week 1 of the playoffs, 4 seed, 5 seed, or let's say it's Seattle, one of those teams, and you're hosting that team, and you lose that game 33-30. And yet again, you're sitting there like, is Todd Bowles a great defensive coach? Which it's become a larger and larger theme as he continues to be here. And I think there's good moments from Todd Bowles, but this defense has largely underachieved this year. And I don't think on that side of the ball, I don't think you can just say, oh, well, Kalijah Cansey's out, of course they're going to be mid. Like, no. You want your defensive coach still with most of your, and Jamel Dean's been out a couple weeks. That hurts too, but they have some depth at corner. I think that you can look at Todd Bowles and be like, man, that defense should have carried the load a little bit more, like, to help out the offense when they were struggling, right? It shouldn't have had to turn into Baker Mayfield and Emeka Egbuka against the world for the majority of the season there. You know what I'm saying? I think there's a chance we get to the postseason. It's like, yeah, we're gonna fire Todd Bowles anyway. It just depends on who's healthy, how things go, and we're probably too far ahead of ourselves to have those conversations anyway. But it's been a very interesting year for the Bucs. I feel like we're kind of talking in circles with this team. So let's go ahead and move forward to the Dallas Cowboys at number 16. Big week. They knock off the Eagles. Well, don't knock them off. The Eagles are still going to win that division. But they get to 5-5-1. And they jump up 3 spots in the rankings. And for me, I'm ready to jump Dallas up into the playoff fringe category. I was so impressed by what they did against the Raiders, but it was the Raiders. And we still had them in that last tier after that. But with all the moves at the deadline, the improvements on defense, how Dak is playing with this wide receiver duo, and CD wasn't even good this week. That's what's crazy. Ton of drops. But now that they beat the Eagles, I mean, it's on for Dallas. Now it's just catch-up mode. Can they actually get into the dance with a 5-5-1 record? But as far as where I had Dallas heading into the year, I had them 19th overall. I had them 18th originally, and then they traded Micah Parsons, which I dropped them a spot after that. I predicted they would go 8-9. And I don't think I was terribly off here. I think if you told me that midseason they were going to add Jadeveon Clowney and Quinnen Williams, I'd probably feel better about that defense, which is exactly what happened. And then I'm probably talking about maybe I predict them 9-8 and rank them more 16th as opposed to 8-9, ranking 18th. So I think as far as expectations, I was pretty spot on with Dallas. However, there's one area that they have been much better that could be the difference here. Although I really do think the defensive additions are the biggest deal. But I was lower on this run game and Javonte Williams. So they are 15th in rushing DVOA. I ranked them as the 27th run game heading into the year. I thought this running back room was a joke. I didn't think Javonte could stay healthy. Even if he did, he hadn't played well the last few years. He's been great. He's been a very useful, good, top half of the league running back this year. It's made a difference for them. So that's where I really was off on the Cowboys defense, or the Cowboys overall, rather. They've been much better there. But I had them as the 10th passing game coming in. They're 9th in passing DVOA. I had them as the 25th ranked defense. And again, I don't feel the need to apologize there. They played about that level until they added Jadeveon Clowney and Quinnen Williams, which changes that. So I don't feel the need to apologize about those things. But definitely as a run game, Javonte Williams has been the one area where I was truly wrong about this team. But I would say things are going relatively well for Dallas overall. I think you always knew this, especially after they traded Micah Parsons, you always knew this was going to be kind of a transition season as they figure out the defense, as I almost said Matt Nagy, the other ex-Bears head coach, Matt Eberflus. Matt Eberflus was going to have to come in and kind of evolve this defense, very different system, get used to a new roster, bring in some new talent. There was just so many reasons why it was going to be a middling year for Dallas, and it still largely has been. But I think you've checked all of the boxes that you would have wanted to see from this season if you didn't have playoff expectations. And I'll explain what those checked boxes are, but I think that leaves you with Dallas where anything you get now is house money, assuming they just kind of keep playing at the level that they're at. But if they finish 9-7-1 and that's just not enough to make the playoffs, I don't think you're devastated if you're a Cowboys fan. I think you walk out of this well, you know what? We traded Micah Parsons, but it didn't kill us. I don't know that I make that trade again, but there's at least a way that you can contextualize this in that it makes sense for the Dallas Cowboys and that could just be a win-win trade. Because, number one, you took some of those assets and still turn it into Quinnen Williams, who's a cheaper impact defensive player that's clearly made a big impact for this team. Number two, you also hit on Donovan Ezeraku as a second-round pick. And I'm tired of people saying this front office is a joke because they make mistakes. The Jerry Jones of it all is frustrating and can get in their way at times. But this is not a bad front office. They are one of the best drafting teams in the league. This year, Tyler Booker, Donovan Ezeraku, looking sick. But Dallas's D-line's pretty good. You also got Kenny Clark back in that trade. He's been fine. You're able to pick up Jadeveon Clowney. They have adjusted very well post Parsons trade. like their D-line is better now than it was with Micah Parsons. And it's because of all the other moves they've made. So that's great. And then I also think because they didn't pay Parsons, I think they will now be able to afford George Pickens. So you're telling me you get an extra first-round pick, the D-line's actually better, we can actually extend George Pickens, who's been an incredible acquisition for them. Now, maybe that's putting the cart before the horse. Maybe they get into a contract saga with Pickens, but I mean, that's all pretty freaking good if you're assessing this whole thing. So it's actually a pretty optimistic outlook on the Cowboys. I know it's fun to like make fun of Jerry Jones and all that. I don't always feel the need to do that. Like, it was definitely questionable when they traded away Parsons, and I don't know if this was all planned or if they stumbled into this, but the results tell you, like, they're making this work. And I don't think they need to, like I said, I don't think they need to make the playoffs to constitute a success. But if they get in, this team could play spoiler and win a playoff game. But I think at the end of the day, like, you're really looking at this as a successful season. You're walking out of this year with a Bengals-esque QB wide receiver duo, assuming they can extend Pickens. I kind of like Brian Schottenheimer. I think he's got it as a head coach. I do. And it was one of those deals where it's like, there's no reason why I should feel great about Brian Schottenheimer, but I kind of just believe in it. I wish I would have said that more often because I think he's solid. I think he's better than McCarthy. He's a good play caller. He seems pretty solid in terms of like running the show there. So I think you're walking out of there with a coach, quarterback, wide receiver combo that you love. You got an extra first-round pick this year. You got some defensive pieces really settling in. Dallas is in a pretty good spot all of a sudden. All right, moving on to the Chicago Bears at number 15, who climb up 2 spots in the rankings this week. I know Bears fans are like exhausted that they're not climbing up more. The thing is, like, the teams in front of them just keep winning, so it's like hard to find teams to push them above, if that makes sense. But man, there's been a lot of back and forth with me and Bears fans over the last few weeks because I've done what I do with any team that has an easy schedule, and I call it out and say, look, it's impressive that they're winning close games and beating the teams that they should beat, and they deserve credit for it, but they only deserve a certain amount of credit. That's been consistent across the board with my channel for years, but because I'm a Packers fan and it's the Bears, there's going to be some added discourse there, no doubt. But look, man, we're sitting here looking back on this, and I had the Bears 16th coming into the year. I predicted that they would go 10-7. People think I hate the Bears, but I'm not trying to like sound full of myself here. I'm just being real. I'm extremely proud that I am a Packers fan, yet take the time and go back and look at my Bears analysis over the last 7 years. I don't know that I've been more accurate about a single football team than I have been about the Chicago Bears. I said pump the brakes after the Khalil Mack year when they had Super Bowl aspirations. I was like, yeah, but Trubisky's your quarterback. Like, probably not going to go how you think. After that, I think my Justin Fields analysis from day one through the point that they had the number 1 pick and there was still a 50-50 split in Bears world of go with Justin Fields over Caleb Williams. The entire Fields saga from worth the initial risk, but has a lot of issues, was overrated to an extent by a lot of draft analysts, in my opinion, at the time, but still had hope. I think through that whole Justin Fields saga and now into this year, and even last year, I was very accurate on the Bears. I think I was within a game on their record prediction and kind of how their rookie Caleb season would go. Now into this year, where I think 10-7, ranked 16th. Yeah, some people might rank the Bears higher because their record's better. Again, they have a negative point differential this week against the Steelers, where they just got by against Mason Rudolph and the Steelers at home in Soldier Field. That was their first win against a team with a winning record this year. Like, they still have a lot to prove. I feel like I've been spot on this Bears team, man. So I'm proud of it, despite all the back and forth with Bears fans this year. But at the end of the day, this season has already been a success for the Bears. Ben Johnson's legit. Caleb Johnson is developing. He's not all perfect. You know, the inaccuracy problems continue to show up at frustrating moments at times. The processing is getting there. I love to see him attack the middle of the field, the way he's playing off of play action. There's clear developments with his processing compared to last year. What he's doing to elude sacks this year is generational stuff. You just can't get this guy down in the backfield. It's insane. So at the end of the day, this season has been a victory. They are going to have a winning record, I think. I don't think they lose out. Be pretty crazy if they did. But, like, you're walking out of this year feeling great if you're a Bears fan. This is everything you could have realistically hoped for. But at the same time, they're first place in the NFC North. They've won 4 straight, and Bears fans are on cloud 9 right now. So I think it really just comes down to, when you talk about the Bears, like, what are your expectations for this team? I feel like I've got them at a good spot. I really do. And they can continue, like, they've been climbing, right? They've moved up, 4 spots in the last 3 weeks, I think? Like, they're getting there. They're climbing up. They're starting to stack real wins on top of each other. I thought the Vikings was their first real win, like, against a capable team. Like, honestly, like, their schedule was that big of a joke before that. But this week they beat a team with a winning record, even though their starting quarterback was out. But they're getting there, right? Like, I love every year with teams like this, I get the comments of, like, it's February and the Bears just won the Super Bowl and TFG still has them ranked 17th. It's like, no, that just is, it never happens. I get those comments every year. The team just changes. It's like, no, you will go up as you get credit, and that's what's happening here. We're getting there. Big opportunity this week, Friday, against the Eagles. But, like, let's see where this goes, man. They finish their schedule at Philadelphia, at Green Bay. They've got Cleveland and Chicago. Then they host Green Bay, at San Francisco, and then they have Detroit. That's a schedule, man. That's a schedule. And I'll say this, like, if this team only wins one more game this year, I wouldn't be that surprised. But you know what would happen if that happens? Is it would be full-scale panic from Bears fans, and I would be sitting here probably higher on the Bears at that point, because I'd be like, yeah, but, like, you accomplished all this good stuff this year. Like, okay, so you ran into some of the best teams in the NFL, and your schedule, like, it just, that was how the schedule worked and the timing of it worked. But if you spread everything out more, where they lost some more games earlier, if you had more Green Bay and Lions and Niners games earlier, and then you got some wins at the back end of the year, you would feel great if you finished 10-7 or 9-8, and Ben Johnson looked great, and and Caleb Williams was developing, right? So I can already see it playing out that way. Maybe I'm wrong, right? And I'll eat my crow if the Bears win 11 or 12 games here and really become a contender in the NFC. I just don't see them there yet. I see them as a team that's absolutely heading in the right direction, that has the right coach that's going to help this team win close games and continue to build this team in the right direction. But I think success for the Bears at this point is legitimately just get one of those hard games. Whether it's one of the Packers games, beat Detroit, go to San Francisco and win is probably the most realistic one, or this Friday at Philadelphia. And then don't lose to the Browns too. Like, the Browns can upset anybody with that D-line, but I think if you can win 2 more, get to 10 wins, see if that gets you in the playoffs or not. It should. It might not, but it should. And that should be a success, is a 10-win season for the Bears. I really think so. If they really did finish 1-5, it would definitely feel a little disappointing, but I don't think it's impossible, and we probably shouldn't overreact if that happens. It's just the reality of what their schedule has been this year. All right, let's go to the Los Angeles Chargers at number 14 here. So I had them ranked 14th coming into the year. They fell down after the Rashawn Slater injury. And at that point, I predicted a 9-8 season. And that's where they're at right now. I will say this. Before Joe Alt went down for the year, they were better than that. They were more of a top 10 team, probably easily on their way for maybe an 11 or a 12-win season. But the compounding of those injuries has left them more in the state that I thought they'd be in after the Rashawn Slater injury. But regardless of that, I mean, it obviously just sucks, right? Like they, with those injuries, are now just kind of treading water to get through this season. It really is what it feels like. Like I would love to hear, if you're a Chargers fan, do you actually have Super Bowl expectations? More power to you if you do, but that just feels untouchable for the Chargers right now. They have shown with these tackles out, they face a good pass rush, and this offense just disappears, man. And I'm not ready to like put pressure on Herbert and anything like that. I think, you probably could find some schematic answers if you're Greg Roman in some of these games, but ultimately, like, it just sucks. Like I can't. You lose 2 Pro Bowl caliber tackles when you have a quarterback that ideally wants to kill you from the pocket. Now, I think, like I said, when Alt was in there, they were a better team than I thought they would be post-Slater injury. And a big part of that was Herbert's been extending plays and doing, in a lot of these games, everything he can. I think he's cooled down from the first month of the year of, like, just God mode status from him. But he is generally speaking been so much better with his legs and getting these playmakers going, and the receivers. Like that's why I say, like, you're just kind of treading water to get through this year, because you're like, man, once we get these tackles back with the green lights they've hit with their playmakers, and then you hopefully can just add some more talent to a defense that has been kind of predictably mid after probably overachieving last year, you can get excited about next year. But what does the rest of this year do for you at this point? Like, you know who this team is, I feel like, and they just don't have the upside to me to get into the playoffs and, like, make serious noise. I might be wrong about that, but I don't know, man. So their upcoming schedule is Philadelphia. They play the Raiders this week, so they should win that. But then they have Philadelphia, at Kansas City, at Dallas, Houston, and Denver. Like, they might lose all those. They might win a handful of those. They're not going to win all of them. I feel pretty strongly about that. So I think this team, if they can get to 10 wins, that's probably enough to get you into the dance, but it also might not, because it depends also, like, do you beat Kansas City? Do you beat Houston? It kind of depends who they beat on that run. But even if they get in, I don't want to be overly pessimistic about the Chargers, but it just feels like they are treading water to get to next year. And yeah, technically success would be to win a few more games and get into the playoffs. But at the same time, it's like, is this team going to be like dejected if they only win this Raiders game and then lose the last 5 games and you get a better draft pick? Is this team really going to lose confidence? I don't think so. That's not in the identity of a Harbaugh team. It's almost to me like, oh, do I just want to be 8-9 and get the 14th pick instead of the 19th pick, and give you a much better chance at getting an impact D lineman for this team? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think you're that bummed if that happens if you're a Chargers fan. And I really do think it is that D-line that needs to be addressed in the first round. Like, they just need some juice up front, man. They had a little fun with Owe when he first came in, but he's gone quiet. I would love to see them get an impact 3 technique to this defense that can help that pass rush out. All right, number 13, the San Francisco 49ers. I'm going to go a little bit quicker through this one. Again, this show's getting pretty long. But this is one of those teams that it's like, for this exercise, does it really matter what I said about them coming into the year? Because they have been absolutely decimated by injuries. I ranked them 9th coming into the year. I predicted they would go 12-5, knowing that they had a very easy schedule. I actually predicted they would win the NFC West. What we're going to say about the Rams later on has basically ruled that out, and the Seahawks. But I feel good about still believing in the Niners. I guess I'll say that. I mean, the Robert Saleh factor has been everything that you could have possibly asked for. What they've done to take a defense that now that, I mean, after Bosa and Wagner went down, like, they already had some holes on defense that needed to be filled. Their ability to just be an average defense, it's like all Robert Saleh. It's insane what he's done to make this season possible for the Niners. But then, yeah, Kyle Shanahan doing a great job there. Mac Jones did a great job there. Brock Purdy's got to play better moving forward, man, or we might have a controversy on our hands, because that was ugly on Monday night. But yeah, I think the rest of the way, this team is 8-4. I think success to me is you get into the playoffs and you stay upright. You don't suffer any more season-ending injuries. Knock on wood. We know that this team, it's just every week, it's like one of those is waiting to happen. It's like it's unlike anything I've ever seen with the amount of just star players that they've lost. And then, I mean, you have the whole Ayuk saga now at this point. So the idea of him coming back and adding another superstar to that offense, it feels like that's not going to happen. To me, it's like, man, you come out of this, you win 11 games, Shanahan maybe gets a Coach of the Year award, and then maybe you get to the playoffs and you try to do what you do and kind of bleed teams out with this. You know, they've kind of had this methodical offense, kind of picking you apart, trying to keep the defense fresh and off the field, have these long, sustained drives. They can beat, like, they're a good enough team. They're ranked 13th here. They're a playoff caliber team. They have a strategy about them where they can bleed out good teams and find ways to win games against better opponents. But can they do that every single week? Can they keep that game script favorable to them against other teams that are better at dictating the game script? That's where you worry about them in comeback mode against explosive passing attacks, taking advantage of this defense. That's when you're really worried about them. But it is extremely commendable that they've had the year that they've had. I think success for them is just finish it off. You know, get to 10 or 11 wins, get into the playoffs, which with their upcoming schedule should be possible. And you can feel better about them, you know, next year, getting their defense back, basically. But then at number 12, the Houston Texans. Again, we're on a run here, and I did not do this intentionally. I didn't go back and look at where I had them ranked before I came up with this week's power rankings, but I had Houston ranked 12th heading into the year, and here we are. They ranked 12. I also predicted a 10-7 season with an elite defense and an offense who will struggle in certain matchups against great defensive lines because their offensive line was such an issue. And, I mean, you couldn't have analyzed the Texans season any better than that right there. Now, I will say this. Will Anderson, I didn't say he couldn't do this. I just had merely pointed out that he is probably a tier 2 edge rusher heading into the year. And I pointed out that if he can take that leap to be a Parsons, Nick Bosa, you know, that level, that tier 1 guy, if he can take that leap, then this team can make some serious noise. And Will Anderson has done that. And that's huge for this team. We have seen this defense's ability to just single-handedly win games for this team. They have, in my opinion, the definition of a championship caliber defense, a defense that can go up against great quarterbacks like Josh Allen and suffocate you. And when you're able to do that, And it reminds me of the Eagles defense last year. We spend so much time talking about Jalen Hurts. The identity of that Eagles team was a great run game with Saquon, but it was the defense. They suffocated teams. The Texans have that. And you're telling me with an offensive line that has actually, throughout the course of the last 6 weeks, learned about itself and made some tweaks and is better than they were in the first month of the year where they were just dysfunctional and derailed everything offensively that they wanted to do. They have slowly discovered some things, especially with the offensive line. You got Trent Brown at right tackle, is healthy and he's okay. Titus Howard's been like the perfect baseball utility player. He's played right guard, right tackle, and left guard, and he's been good at all of those spots. Ed Ingram's been a nice add. He's settled in at right guard for them. You know, talented young player, getting better. He's been a nice fit here. He's fine to good even. And then Ariante Ursary, their rookie left tackle, he's been through it at times this year. He's had some ugly losses, but, you know, he's a capable second-round left tackle that's starting out there. So, like, they've settled in. They've also learned that if they just basically run toss and wide zone, and to be fair, Woody Marks had some good inside runs this week against the Bills, the worst run defense in the league, by the way, or second worst behind the Giants. But you know, they've stopped losing 2 yards a carry with their run game like they did in the first part of the year. So you're telling me, and by the way, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel have been discovered as these fun rookie picks that myself and so many people liked. So you're telling me that CJ Stroud can't come in after missing 3 weeks with a concussion with the solutions that they've found, play at a good level, doesn't need to be amazing, but just be somewhere between what people think about CJ Stroud and rookie year CJ Stroud, which I would just say is sophomore year CJ Stroud, when, by the way, the Texans won their division, won a playoff game, and put Patrick Mahomes in hell. If their special teams didn't spot the Chiefs like 9 points in that game, they're probably in the AFC Championship. I continue to say people are so stupid for their CJ Stroud takes that he was bad last year. He was still pretty freaking good. Just going to say that. He had more ugly games than you probably hoped for, but overall, like, they got to the playoffs, and that dude was still a killer. I was really impressed by what Stroud did against that Spags defense last year in a game that the Texans, frankly, should have won. So the idea that Stroud was just a nothing burger last year, shut that up. That drives me crazy if you couldn't tell. But I'm just saying, man, this team, I think I kind of nailed this Texans team at the end of the day, where there was reasons to be hesitant to not rank them crazy high because you knew the offensive line had a chance at derailing things. But also pointing out, like, look, we're ranking these teams at their floor coming in and pointing out, like, man, if they can just clean some things up with the O-line and if Will Anderson can take a leap, this team can make some serious noise. And maybe I'm overly optimistic on the Texans, but I did my regular predictions, like my kind of gun to my head predictions. That's where I had the Texans at 10-7. But I did, just to kind of open things up a little bit, because it never goes that way, right? Things never play out exactly how you fully, gun to your head would pick it. I made 6 or 7 like fun hot take predictions at the end of my preseason predictions video. And one of those was the Texans going to the Super Bowl out of the AFC as the kind of like, yeah, I think the Ravens probably go, but if I'm not picking the Ravens and I want to make kind of like an out there bolder take, how about the Texans to go to the Super Bowl? And that was the pick. And man, I really hope they can finish the job because this team is really fun. I think they're playing at a really high level. They keep climbing up in these rankings. And with that, to finish the Texans conversation, I think success to me on the Texans is that they win a playoff game. Get in, which isn't going to be easy. They have at Indianapolis, at Kansas City, They've got Arizona, Las Vegas, they have the Chargers, and they have the Colts. So 4 playoff caliber teams in there, mixed in with Arizona and the Raiders. So probably talking about them getting to 10 wins, splitting against those playoff teams, and hoping that gets them in. But if they do, nobody wants to play this Texans team. And I could absolutely see a version where Stroud comes back after the concussion, and this turns into a pretty dangerous team that maybe even like just boat races that schedule and turns into a powerhouse as we approach the playoffs. They're a sleeping giant right now and have been for a few weeks. I think their teams are sleeping on them a lot less as of late. All right, so now we have my tier 2 of teams, and talking through that, I'm kind of wondering if I should put the Texans in there, but I think with some of the concerns we saw earlier, let's see Stroud get back and them really get up there before we bump Houston up into this category. But at number 11, I have Green Bay here for the second week in a row, and I had Green Bay ranked 8th heading into the year after the Parsons trade. Before the Parsons trade, I had them 11th, which is right where they are here today. And I predicted them to go 11-6, and that was with Micah Parsons. So I would say they're about where I predicted them. There's been some slight differences in how they've played. I think the defense has largely looked as expected, where the run defense is going to have some issues. You're going to be able to attack some members of the secondary, but overall, this is going to be one of the best pass rushers in the league, and in turn, one of the best defenses in the league. We've seen that. I think the offense has been a little bit more frustrating than expected. Not horrible, but they've definitely had their frustrations there. They're just such a weird team because the metrics love the Packers. They're 5th in offensive DVOA, 4th in offensive EPA per play. They're 9th in points per drive. On paper, they're a great offense, but you watch the Packers and they don't feel that way. And it's really hard to like put pen to paper and tell you why that is. I think the number one thing is their early down run game has not been nearly as effective as it was last year. I think LaFleur has done a better job the last 2 weeks against the Giants and Vikings, kind of, at least early in the Vikings game, opening things up, doing drop back passing game stuff on earlier downs instead of these predictable runs that go nowhere. Now, once it became clear that J.J. McCarthy was not moving the ball in this defense, they just kind of buckled up and just ran the game out. But overall, I think for a few weeks there, we saw LaFleur really struggle to identify what this team does well. And that's kind of the quick passing game. That's kind of what this team is good at. Passing the ball short to intermediate. Yes, people love to slam Jordan Love for the questionable turnovers that he does have. But they let that override the fact that he's actually pretty surgical at reading defenses, making quick decisions. He's been much more accurate since the first few weeks of the season. Haven't really, knock on wood, haven't really had to think about Jordan Love's inaccuracy issues for a couple months, which is great because that to me is the biggest issue with Jordan Love. But anyway, I think that's been a big deal, is that LaFleur has wanted to be, come out and just do heavy formation runs and play action shot plays on all these earlier downs, when in reality, the strength of this team is the receivers and Jordan Love right now, and the pass protection over the run blocking especially. So that's led to some frustrations. And then it's like I said, I compared them to the Panthers, where they've had so many penalties and procedural issues. Then the next drive, you've got drops. And then the next drive, that just happens to be the time Jordan Love chucks the ball into triple coverage. And then, it's 4th and 1 and they call a shot play for no reason. I need to look up the numbers, but having watched the Packers, I feel like their worst enemy is the 40-yard line. It feels like they always get to the 40 and then don't go anywhere past that. And I think only watching Packers games, you would agree with that, but I think that'll resonate pretty hard with Packers fans. But yeah, they've had just a lot more inconsistency offensively than I expected. But overall, I think things are going well for Green Bay. Yeah, they played down to the Browns. They played down to the Panthers. Frustrating. Like, that's why they're here at 11 and not 4, right? But I think it's still all in front of Green Bay to lock in offensively, get these receivers healthy. Matthew Golden hasn't been healthy. He's basically missed the last month. Jaden Reed should be back maybe as soon as this Lions game. Get Josh Jacobs back healthy because he hasn't been healthy for weeks. I know Jacobs wants to play against Detroit. Let him rest. Let him rest and get 100% for the playoffs because Emmanuel Wilson's just fine. And honestly, the Packers need to open up the passing game against the Lions anyway because you're not going to run against that front, not with this offensive line and the run blocking there. But I still think it's in front of Green Bay. If they miss the playoffs, that's a colossal disappointment, and I think it needs to go beyond that. I think this team needs to go to the NFC Championship to constitute success because the expectations were raised that high. They were top 3 in Super Bowl odds for the first 2 months of this season. They've fallen since then, rightfully so. But I think for Green Bay, they've shown the highs that they can be that team, and they need to, if you want to genuinely ask what's success for them, it's at least win a playoff game. But I think win 2 is, should be the expectations for them. Okay, Baltimore at number 10. Fascinating conversation here. So I had them second heading into the year and predicted they would go 12-5, and they were my Super Bowl pick this year before the season. Now, if we're just assessing this right now, yes, I was wrong, quote unquote, but let's see where this goes. This is one of the more unique seasons I remember for a team where you just got to be honest about what's happened to the Ravens this year. They have a brutal start with a brutal schedule. They lost to Buffalo week 1. They lose to Detroit in a great game where they looked like the Ravens, at least offensively. They looked like the Ravens we know and love, but they had those defensive struggles earlier in the year, which I will talk about. But they lose to Detroit. They lose at Kansas City, where Lamar leaves in the second half. And then with a backup quarterback, they lose to Houston and the Rams. These are some of the best teams in the NFL, straight up, that are the Ravens' 5 losses on the year. Beyond that, they haven't lost a game since, well, even before Lamar came back. But since Lamar came back, they haven't lost. Now, their schedule's been pretty easy. They have a big test ahead. But I don't think we have any idea how good this Ravens team is, honestly, because of the hard schedule to start, Lamar getting hurt, and now an easy schedule where they've been winning. Let's just see. Let's just see what the hell happens here before I say I was wrong about this team, because I still think this team could come out of the AFC. There's not a dominant team in the AFC. I think the Ravens could absolutely keep getting hot. And the way that they have settled back down with their defense, it's exactly what happened last year. Do not forget that the Ravens, who were a powerhouse by the end of the season, their defense sucked ass. Brett Coleman called this the Legion of Room like week 8 last year. So, yeah, their defense sucked earlier in the year, but there's a record of them cleaning this up and playing great defense. Now, again, they haven't played the best opponents, but they absolutely have buckled down defensively. So, I'm not ready to say I was wrong on this Ravens team. I'm not. I'm not even ready to apologize for picking them to win the Super Bowl. I will say there are some aspects of this team that aren't as good as I hoped they would be. And the defense is one of them. Even if they're playing better defensively, I still think there's a lack of fear factor with this defense. The D-line, losing Madubuike is huge. Absolutely huge. They just don't have a go-to pass rusher beyond him. So when they start to play these great offenses again, you got to worry that they're going to give up a bunch of points like they did against the Bills and the Chiefs and the Lions. And then also their run game. And a big part of this is Lamar was out for an extended period of time, but it also just hasn't been as good. And I don't think Derrick Henry has been as good. He still has some of those breakaway runs, and there's still a good bit of Derrick Henry in there, but he was incredible last year. And I talked about this in Studs and Duds, but his missed tackle force rate is down like a third of what it was last year. His yards after contact is down. Like everything is way down for him. And I think you felt a little bit of that lack of that factor. But overall, it's been an interesting season for the Ravens, and we're going to have to see where this goes. I think success to me is to win this division and compete for the Super Bowl. You know, if they end up having to play the Bills round 1 because the Bills are a 5 seed and they lose 35-32, I don't think that's like devastating. I don't think anyone's going to be mad at them if they don't come out of this after a 1-5 start and win the Super Bowl. But I do think you got to finish this and at least win the division, right? You got coming up. It's not, there's no easy games left, but I would say these are all winnable, and you don't have to win all of them. But you've got the Bengals twice. Joe Burrow is coming back to play them here for Thanksgiving, it looks like. You've got the Steelers twice. We talked about how big those games are earlier. New England is a big game, but, you know, I think winnable with Lamar Jackson. And Green Bay. So it's again, not an easy schedule, but I think especially if you can just beat Pittsburgh twice, you're probably going to bury them. And you can still win this division at 9-8. So I think get in and look competitive in a playoff game and see where it goes from there is kind of where you're at. And then recoup for next year. Regroup next year. I know there's a lot of Fire Harbaugh talks. I hear you. I don't think it's crazy, but I just don't think the Ravens are going to do it. So I don't feel the need to entertain that. At least like Todd Monken hasn't been such a beast that you're going to lose him as your play caller. And Zach Orr is settled down again as DC. So I don't think you're in the worst spot with the coaching situation. All right, the Colts at number 9, falling down 2 spots in the rankings this week. And this is a kind of a fun one because I had them ranked 20th heading into the year. And I predicted that they would go 8-9. And you look at how they're playing this year, and the hindsight police are going to be like, you idiot. You were way too low on the Colts. But look, man, my intro for the Colts deep dive was highlighting all of the messages by people telling me I was way too high on the Colts, and me literally saying, you guys, I'm telling you, this team is not as bad as you think they are. And in that hot takes prediction video that I mentioned, I said, hey, how about the Colts with Daniel Jones making the playoffs? I'm extremely proud to have been the high man on the Indianapolis Colts coming out of this offseason. I'm sure there were like Colts fans that predicted them to do that. Look, if you can find me another analyst out there that had, the Colts as high as I did, or, had a take that they were going to make the playoffs with Daniel Jones when it was all negative banter about how do you not play Anthony Richardson? You have to see what you have in him. I was like, look, man, I think Daniel Jones can run this offense pretty well. They've been 9-win teams with Gardner Minshew and Joe Flacco and Anthony Richardson. It's like, I think this thing can work. And it's absolutely working. Now, it has worked to this point in the season far better than I could have ever imagined. I mean, they were offensively like one of the more efficient offenses and still kind of are like a historically efficient offense. Now, it's come back down to earth in recent weeks, but they're still really sweet. And they still just went into Arrowhead and looked very competitive. Now, it's disappointing that the offense, closed up and Daniel Jones couldn't find answers against a Spags defense and they couldn't score to end the game. And they, I don't want to call it a collapse, but they kind of collapsed. It's not great. And, Daniel Jones this week was fine, but he's been turning the ball over, putting the ball in harm's way a lot more in recent weeks. So it's kind of come back to earth a little bit with the Colts. And that was, probably to be expected a little bit, but overall, like this offense is just a machine. Everything we've said about them, the O-line has been awesome. Jonathan Taylor, still an offensive player of the year candidate. I think, the last 3 weeks he's slowed down, but Daniel Jones has shown like he can push the ball downfield more than he ever has. He's made some throws under pressure that have been really impressive. Like, I think you can expect some level of that play to continue, even if some of the turnovers ramp up a little bit. These playmakers all complement each other so well. That's a big reason why I was optimistic about this team. Was you look at these receivers on paper and it's like, man, they got the deep threat in Pierce. They got the slot guy in Downs. They got the physical guy in Pittman. You got your do-it-all tight end. You got your superstar running back. You got an O-line. Like this team is just so fun. I definitely think coming out of this year, like I don't want to hear anybody question Shane Steichen again because that ticked me off. That he was underwhelming or should be on the hot seat. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like this team has overachieved with backup quarterbacks in there. So I love to see what they're doing. Now, the second they make that Sauce Gardner trade, they kind of change their expectations. The second they trade 2 first-round picks for Sauce, it's like, no, we got to like be a player in the AFC and compete for. I mean, you're kind of saying like you think this team's going to compete for a Super Bowl in the next couple of years when you make that trade. And you also are saying Daniel Jones is the guy because you're giving 2 first-round picks away and kind of forfeiting the opportunity to spend a first-round pick on a QB in the next couple of years. So the second they make that trade, the expectations change, and I think you got to get this thing back on the tracks a little bit, right? Like, I think that's fair to say. They've lost 2 of the last 3. One to the Steelers, one to the Chiefs, a couple of AFC playoff caliber teams, right? Like those are the teams you're going to have to beat if you're going to go be a Super Bowl team. And you got to go back to week 2 against Denver to the last time they had a real win, or at least I don't want to say a real win because they've blown out some teams and looked incredible against bad teams. So those are real wins. So I take that back. But since they beat a winning team was week 2 against Denver, and it took kind of a field goal debacle for that to happen. But there are other wins: Miami, Tennessee, Las Vegas. They barely beat Arizona. They beat the Chargers when they were at their absolute worst, when the Chargers were getting beat by the Giants and Commanders with all those injuries. Tennessee again, and then Atlanta in overtime. So you want to see this team rack up a better resume and, go on a run in the AFC. But overall, I mean, it's overwhelming optimism for the Colts. And if you want me to apologize for what I said about the Colts coming into the year, it's just not going to happen. I mean, nobody predicted that this was possible for the Colts, and it's great that it happened. There's a lot of teams here where I will say I was wrong. But until you show me the person that was higher on the Colts than me, I'm not going to do that because people thought I was nuts for ranking them 20th and having them go 8-9 and considering them as like a playoff potential team. So at number 8, the Kansas City Chiefs, who coming into the year, I had ranked 5th coming off of another Super Bowl appearance. And I actually kind of faded the Chiefs a little bit in my predictions at 11-6, and I actually had them getting upset round 1 by Denver. And in my hot takes segment, I also threw out Denver winning this division and then Kansas City getting in as a wild card. I'm feeling pretty good about those as predictions for this season. It's pretty much unobtainable that they win the AFC West at this point, and it looks like it is going to be Denver that gets that. So I'm liking that. And then I just think like a lot of my kind of meh vibes on the Chiefs, having won all those close games last year, a defense that on paper just continues to get thinner, and it's Chris Jones or Steve Spagnuolo electric game plan or bust. And you're still seeing some games. Like they came out, they beat the Colts with a great game plan from Spags. Like they can still have those big playoff moments. The Chiefs are not going anywhere, and they're getting a +2 here this week in the rankings. So like they're obviously heading back towards being that boogeyman that even if it has to be as a wild card team, they might still sneak in. And then offensively, like they're good. You know, you got Mahomes, you got Reed, like they find answers and all that. But the strength of that team is the interior of the offensive line, yet it's almost like they got burned by the Clyde Edwards-Helaire first-round pick so bad that they truly don't think running backs matter. Like, I'm watching this game against the Colts, and they got it done. They ran the ball 30 times. They chipped away at that Colts defense. But man, it's just so hard not to watch that and be like, what would Breece Hall have done in that game? And how much could you reduce your margin for error if you just got explosiveness from your run game? And they just don't value that. And in most games, they have shown that they don't want to run the ball like they did in that game against the Colts. It's great to see that they did it. But I don't think teams really respect their run game. And then you look at this receiving core outside of Rashee Rice, and it's just all these vertical speedsters. 3 of them with Thornton and Worthy and Brown. And it's like, if you could force teams to load up the box and respect your run game, I think things would open up the field a lot better, but that's not necessarily how teams are playing you. And by the way, Mahomes just hasn't been an accurate deep ball thrower for a long time now. So there's just kind of a disconnect with a lot of how this offense is constructed right now, and it's leading to a lot of inconsistencies. But, overall, I think they're still a playoff caliber team. There's finally some competition in their division that's making things tough, that beat them a week ago. But overall, I think the Chiefs are about where I kind of predicted them to be for the most part. Then we got the Bills at number 7. And they've been disappointing, man. I had them 4th coming in to this season. I had them 13-4 with the best record in the NFL with an easier schedule. And I had them losing in the AFC Championship just because I'd gotten tired of picking them to win the Super Bowl and them disappointing me. But they've been worse than I predicted them to be. And it feels like my worries from 2024 that burned me because they found a way to work around them and still be an excellent team last year. I ranked the Bills 13th heading into 2024, and that looked horrible. We had to do this video last year and eat crow. But it feels like those worries at the time are creeping into 2025 and showing up as issues. And it's the lack of verticality in the passing game. I think teams have figured out a little bit of what they want to do with this quick-hitting passing game and have made Josh Allen a little bit more uncomfortable there, tightening up those windows underneath. And they've turned into a James Cook or bust rushing offense in a lot of these games. And I don't think Josh Allen is playing quite as well this year as he did last year either. But that was an issue for me. It's they don't have an outside vertical presence at wide receiver. And unfortunately, Keon Coleman, it's been a disaster. I mean, he's been a healthy scratch the last 2 weeks. So that's creeping up. And then the defense, man, it's just such a meh defense. And this comes back to the combination of Sean McDermott never truly elevating this defense beyond average for the most part. They have a certain floor with the system that they run that works, but only to, a certain limit. And the front office as well. This defense they've never been able to add a difference-making player to this defense. And Bosa, Joey Bosa is your prayer at that. And he's a little banged up right now. Was great against the Chiefs. You're hoping that he can be healthy come playoff time and be a difference here. But I don't know, man. This team they frustrate the absolute living hell out of me, man. And that, just like I said about the Ravens, the AFC is still open. The Bills can still do this thing. I still think Josh Allen's incredible, and they can figure this thing out. It's not the end of the world, but obviously they fall down 2 in the power rankings here this week. And I'll just say it. I hope that this team loses ugly in the first round of the playoffs and they finally do what needs to be done and go get a real head coach. McDermott is so firmly the 21st best head coach in the league and always has been. If you want to be a real player, go find a guy. I know that the crop this year isn't what it was last year, and that's what makes it so frustrating that they didn't do this last year. Imagine if this team had Ben Johnson, and how quickly would he have signed up to be a part of this offense? I think they probably dropped the ball there. But even maybe that guy's Chris Shula, and maybe that guy isn't an offensive coach, but at least if you're going to have a defensive head coach, at least have the freaking guy that's good at being a defensive coordinator. I don't think Sean McDermott is that good of a defensive coach. He's fine. He's fine. But like if McDermott gets fired and someone hires him as a DC, is anyone going to be like, oh my God, that defense is saved now? No, it's like, oh, they'll probably be a little better. So I don't know. We'll see how the season ends for the Bills. Obviously, I think it's still Super Bowl or bust for the Bills. I do. And that to me constitutes success. I didn't say, by the way, what constitutes success for the Chiefs. To rewind just a second, I don't think that the Chiefs need to win the Super Bowl because they've done it multiple times at this point, right? I think teams are allowed to have a down year where you win 10 or 11 games. They still can because they're the Chiefs, but I think it's different with the Bills because they haven't done it yet. That I think you can look at the Chiefs and be like, it's okay. You'll be back. All right. For the Denver Broncos at number 6, climbing up 2 spots this week on the bye week, with a couple teams losing around them like Buffalo. But for them, I had them ranked 10th heading into the year. I had them going 10-7 and winning a playoff game. And then again, I had that nice little hot take prediction where somebody else wins the AFC West, being the Broncos. I'll take that as a side bet W, even if I didn't go all the way and truly predict them to win this division. But I definitely thought it was possible, and that's where they're at. I mean, this is just such a complete football team. I think the defense speaks for itself. Relentless pass rush, great coaching, just opportunistic blitzes at the right time, confidence on that side of the ball, relentless. It feels like a brick wall going against this Broncos defense. That's the identity of this team. But I think the offense does a great job complementing the defense, understanding who they are offensively, taking some shot plays in there, but allowing Nicks to maybe scramble for some third downs to keep drives alive, run the football, run a lot of screens, attack the quick game. It's a Sean Payton offense. It's not always perfect because Bo Nix isn't always perfect, straight up, but they're very finely tuned around the edges, and Sean Payton's got this infinite Rolodex of information to sometimes like predict a coverage and dial up a coverage beater and get the right play at the right time. Sometimes can get a little bit too cute offensively, but man, since they knocked off the Chiefs, it's like, all right, they're going to win this division. Like, they are 9-2. They would have to really slip up with their upcoming schedule being the next 2 weeks. They have the Commanders and the Raiders. Feels like they should be able to take care of that. And then they have Green Bay, they have Jacksonville, they got the Chiefs again, they got the Chargers. So can you finish 4-2? And I mean, even 3-3 with that schedule gets you to 12-5 and a division victory. So it's just been an excellent operation here since Sean Payton arrived. Honestly, they are one of these teams that it's the they know how to win thing. And I think it's a team confidence thing. I think it's the point about the offense crafted in a way that it complements the fact that they have this elite defense. And it's just finding these little answers late in games. And they might only beat the Jets by 3 because they don't have this dominant talent to take over games. But they also will beat the Chiefs by 1. They'll beat the Eagles by 1 because they can muddy up games. They can force you to play into their game script, which is not an easy thing to do, but they're capable of doing it. So Denver getting some love in the power rankings this week, going up 6, but also deserve some credit for me to say, like, they have been even better than I expected, even if it's just slightly better. Like, I still like the Broncos coming in, but they've won even more than I predicted them to do this season. As far as what constitutes success for the Broncos, I think, you still wish you could see more offensive consistency before you expect this team to like legitimately go win the Super Bowl this year. It's not that they can't do that, but I do think you want to see this team take that next step, win a playoff game this year, and then, of course, like I said, finish business and win this division as well is a huge step for this team to make on top of that. Then we got the Detroit Lions at number 5. They're going to jump up a spot this week, only really because the Bills are falling. It wasn't a great week for Detroit, kind of a weird week. I wonder if Detroit was actually looking ahead a little bit to the Thanksgiving game against Green Bay because, and that's uncharacteristic for Detroit, but they had so many coverage busts in this game against the Giants in the first half that I was like, who the hell are these Detroit Lions? Not to say they're always perfect in the secondary, but eventually they settled in and reminded you just how explosive this offense is and found a way to get that win against the Giants this week. But obviously we're not just talking about this last week against New York. I had Detroit before the season started ranked third in the NFL. I had them going 12-5 and then losing to Philly in the NFC Championship. And I think that's mostly on track with how they've been. I think they've been slightly worse than I predicted them there. I think there are some legitimate issues with this team, but I will say like where their issues are exactly where I highlighted their question marks heading into the year. So it's not a huge surprise that they've had some pockets of this team that you can go through, that you can beat, most specifically the interior of the offensive line, that young interior duo of guards paired with a new center with Ragnow retiring. There's been some moments where you can get pressure up the middle, and when that happens, Goff can revert to some bit of, I don't want to say the old Jared Goff, but he can struggle to deal with that interior pressure. And we've certainly seen that at points where this offense can stall. I think there's been moments where the play calling doesn't feel just right. I mean, we obviously saw Dan Campbell take over the play calling, and it's been mostly good since they did that. But we are talking about losing Ben Johnson, who I think the world of there. And, the defense is very good, but they depend on Aiden Hutchinson to get home as a pass rusher oftentimes. And it's a man coverage heavy defense that does have a bit of a shaky cornerback room. Like, I know Terrion Arnold's been hurt, but he wasn't great as a rookie. They let Carlton Davis go, who was really good for them. DJ Reed's been good when he's played, but he's been injured. So you've seen some issues with the Lions. They're not a juggernaut. Like it really is like so devastating that they got so hurt last year because they were to me, if they were healthy, the best team in football. But unfortunately it wasn't in the cards for them. So I think overall the Lions have been roughly as expected, maybe slightly worse. And they still have everything in front of them to have a successful playoff run here. I think for them, I think getting to the NFC Championship at a minimum would be successful for them. They still have a chance to win the Super Bowl. I still think when they're on, they are as good of a team as anybody. But they're a little bit more matchup dependent. Like I'd be worried about that interior offensive line, pass protection against the right team that can stop the run and then get you up the middle. But their upcoming schedule, Green Bay, Dallas, at the Rams, Pittsburgh, at Minnesota, and at Chicago. So it's all in front of them, but it's also very it's very dangerous territory for them and honestly for Green Bay, depending on who wins this Thanksgiving game. Like there's only so many playoff spots to go around. So they got to avoid like missing the playoffs too. So it's not all perfect for Detroit. I still feel pretty confident that they can execute down the stretch and take care of business. Number 4, the Philadelphia Eagles. They dropped 2 spots in the power rankings after losing a weird game against Dallas. In the first half, Dallas did everything they could to lose that game. And then in the second half, Philly did everything that they could to lose that game. You also had the block punt that shouldn't have been, that went in Philly's favor. So just kind of a weird game to try to take things away from. I think overall, though, the fact that they ended up losing that game is slightly concerning. Like the offense, great in the first half and then just disappearing in the second half. They just don't have a lot of confidence in their ability to move the football right now. And it's kind of just everything just ties together between the play calling and Hurts with some inconsistencies as a passer. Will be nice to Hurts today because I think he did generally play well in the Cowboys game this week at least. But anyway, like the Eagles are still such a tough out, and heading into the year, by the way, I had them ranked first coming off the Super Bowl. It was hard not to. And I had them losing in the Super Bowl to the Baltimore Ravens. So obviously I had major expectations for Philly, and I still think like they can get it done. They haven't been the world beaters that they were at the end of last year. They've cooled off a little bit. The run game, the offensive line, even I think Saquon's playing great in recent weeks, but to start the season, Saquon was not quite as dynamic as he was last year. But yeah, like flew under the radar how well Mekhi Becton played for them last year. Now Lane Johnson is banged up. Like there's some concerns there, and there's some cracks in the offense this year that they were able to shelter last year with an elite run game, a healthy offensive line for pass pro, and a defense where it was like they were literally able to just be in a game script last year where if it was 3rd and 8 and Jalen Hurts didn't see it, and if he wasn't able to pick it up as a scrambler, he could just throw it away and the defense would get a stop and they'd live to see another day. Well, they haven't been able to control the clock quite as much. The defense is still very good, but it's not quite what it was at the end of last year. And their margin for error is tighter than you hoped it would be, but they're still a damn good football team, man. So I'm not really worried about them. It's all absolutely right in front of them to take care of business. I think there's a lot of noise about them having issues, but at the same time, like the issues that people are talking about are all things that I already have baked into my preconceived notion about the Eagles. Like I already didn't think Jalen Hurts was a good QB last year, and they still won the Super Bowl despite him not playing well until the NFC Championship, basically. Like they still got there. And then he, as Hurts does, like he kind of turns it on and can turn it off at times. So I feel like the Eagles have been about par for the course, if we're being honest. But then the New England Patriots keep climbing up in the rankings. They're up to number 3 now, and this is definitely a team that I was too low on. I had them ranked 27th to start the year with a 7-10 record prediction. And here's what I'll say. There isn't really anything in regards to my analysis that I regret about the Patriots, but I just was clearly too low on predicting their success this season. They were a new team coming together, so many moving pieces. Drake May was not this Drake May last year, but I've always loved Drake May. I've considered this version of him possible. Like I said, I don't regret having this team coming in with a lot of question marks to start the year. But, dude, like the Mike Vrabel of it all, how good Drake May has been, and just the fact that they have hit every single green light. Like they are on a cross-country road trip from Foxborough to LA, and they haven't hit a single red light the entire drive. Like that is what, until now, by the way. Will Campbell suffered an injury. Hopefully we'll be back for the playoffs. That's honestly the first time since week 1 when they were still probably putting pieces together against the Raiders. It feels like this Will Campbell injury is like the first time that they've hit a red light, so to speak. Everything else has been positive development through the roof for Drake May. Offensive line's been pretty good. The receivers have been a major green light. I was worried about these pass catchers. These guys have all been sweet, from Diggs looking healthy to Keyshawn Boutte stepping up to having Douglas and these tight ends. Maybe the one area that they haven't necessarily, quote unquote, hit a green light is with the running backs, where Stevenson's been just okay, and Henderson is heating up lately but had a slow start. So we'll see where that kind of settles at the end of the year. But defensively, like considering they don't really have star talent, they've been really nice. That's where you really feel Mike Vrabel's, the Mike Vrabel factor. Their floor on defense is just outstanding. Everything has come together so nicely there. There as well, though, they did just lose Milton Williams to the IR. So they're starting to get some injuries, which I'm curious to see how they are able to respond to that. I mean, just this week with Campbell leaving and with Milton Williams out, they beat the Bengals 26-20. Took a egregious Joe Flacco pick six to help them do that. So like I'd be lying if I said there isn't a part of me that's at least hesitant on this 10-2 team that is the best record in the league, and they're in a good position to win the AFC East, which is incredible to take that from the Bills. They got to finish strong to do that. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit hesitant. That I don't want to call it fool's gold, but like we're ranking them number 3 here. Like we're saying this team, we got them number 1 in the AFC. Like I think they've earned it. They've had some big wins against the Bills and the Bucs. Drake May is that level of quarterback that that's a big deal to get a guy at this level, obviously, to be a legitimate Super Bowl team. But they still have work to do. And I think success on the season has been achieved already. Like Drake May is the guy. Mike Vrabel has been the hire that you prayed for. But I think they've been so successful this year that I think you'd be a little bummed if they don't win a playoff game, especially if they're home for one of them. But I think anything after that should be considered house money as far as what constitutes success for the Patriots. Now this next team, the Seattle Seahawks, ranking number 2 for me. With New England, I said there's not really anything I said about them that I regret as far as my analysis. It's just a young team that's hit a lot of green lights. With Seattle, I do regret my takes on them. This, I think, is the team that I was the most dead wrong about. I ranked them 21st coming into the year. I had them going 8-9. And I just, after last year, really sticking my neck out for Sam Darnold and being like, hey, he might have like a Geno Smith type of year on the Vikings, and like saying there's a chance that he plays pretty well in Minnesota and all that. After that, I sold my Darnold stock, man. I didn't think he was going to be good here. To be fair, so did Kevin O'Connell. So did a lot of people. I'm not the only one, but I wish I would have had some more faith, man, and trusted the 15, 16 games of outstanding tape on Darnold. It was really 15 because there was the 2 games at the end of the year, the playoff game and the Week 18 game, and then there was the Jags game last year that was also a mess for Darnold. But I wish I would have stood by it. And, I basically came into this like, yeah, he had Kevin O'Connell and Justin Jefferson, and he fell apart at the end of the year. He's coming here with a bad interior line and no vertical threats. And I was like, he likes to push the ball downfield. Who's going to do that here? Marquez Valdez-Scantling? I sold it, man. And I hate that I did that because I don't think I can jump back on the train, but I can definitely give Darnold his credit, man. He has been incredible this year. Now, we did just see that Rams game, and that was a bummer. I really hope that's not the case because he's honestly played at an even higher level outside of that Rams game. And even in that Rams game, he still made some throws to help him get back into it. So he was fighting. But I think the level he's playing at this year is one of the best QBs in the league. The ball gets out quickly and on time. His ability to snap his head around on play action and drive the ball downfield with accuracy before the pass rush can get in. Like, the offensive line's been better than I thought they would be too, but a huge part of that is just the way Darnold gets the ball out. He's towards the top of the league in time to throw, despite the fact that he is a QB that actually does play extension. If you look at the top time to throw leaders, it's like Tua, Joe Flacco. It's a bunch of like guys that just want to get the ball out from the pocket. Well, Darnold does that, but he also runs around sometimes, and that'll rack up your time to throw. So the way that he works within the system is just incredible. The deep accuracy paired with the other point here, obviously, is JSN, and that's the other area that I was wrong about the Seahawks. Like I mentioned earlier, I thought, Darnold likes to push the ball downfield, yet they have like the slowest wide receiving core in the league with JSN and Cooper Kupp. I didn't see the vision for JSN as the best vertical threat in the NFL. I just didn't. I didn't think it was in his bag. I've always thought JSN's like a super high floor dude. He showed some really good play last year. As, you know, someone that could even be like a Amon-Ra St. Brown type figure and just destroy you over the middle of the field. Like, that was all great. But if you're talking about, like, can he get down the field and make a bunch of catches for Sam Darnold and be like a dynamic piece for this offense that's been one of the most dynamic offenses in the league this year? I just didn't see it, man. And the way that he accelerates out of his routes to get down the field, I think his speed is good enough to pull away. And his ability to track the ball, box guys out, he's just automatic. Darnold just puts the ball in his area and he's going to get the ball. It's insane. And, you know, I mocked anybody with JSN coming out that said, you know, Justin Jefferson comps. I thought it was absurd. It's not absurd, man. He's playing like JSN for Darnold. Like it's almost eye for an eye in some of these situations. So I didn't see the vision with that combination of Darnold and JSN, and that makes me look very wrong. Like, I didn't hate this team. I had them predicted them 8-9, 21st in the league. Like, I didn't hate them, but I was clearly wrong about the upside of this team. And then, you know, there's the defensive side of things. This defense has fully come together. That's where, if you go to my Seahawks team preview, like I figured this would turn into a pretty damn good defense here in year 2 with McDonald. Especially, I said, if Byron Murphy can take that leap, you're really going to see that jump. And you've seen that. Byron Murphy has really been something close to a number 1 caliber player for them, and I think that makes a big difference. On top of just, I've said this before, but they have like a hive mind mentality with this defense that you just don't see. Like, everybody is in sync, and it's terrifying to go against. So that's obviously come together as well. And that's not necessarily a surprise to me, but it is good to see nonetheless. And then for this team, like, obviously when you rank this high, you would hope that you can compete for the Super Bowl as far as what constitutes success. I think seeing this team be competitive in what very well could be a road playoff game because they're behind the Rams right now, it is tough to go on the road and win in the playoffs. I think you want to see them bring it. And honestly, I think probably the biggest deal is Sam Darnold not self-combusting in that playoff game, especially if it's got to be on the road. So that is what constitutes success for me for Seattle. But then we got my number 1 team, the LA Rams, who I actually have now separating into tier 1, into a tier of their own. If you want to talk about true perfection as a football team, this team has pulled away. I can't watch this Rams team anymore. And I know the Seahawks were close against them a couple weeks ago, but the Rams did win. It is the NFL, and I've got the Seahawks number 2. Like, you can't expect to kill everybody, but the Rams made the plays and pulled through in that one. But, like, dude, this team is insane. Talk about hitting green lights like we did with New England. The Rams, I had them ranked 7th heading into the year. I had them predicted to go 10-7, and it just wasn't high enough on this team. I like the Rams, but dude, everything they've unlocked this year. Number 1, above all, Matthew Stafford, not only has he stayed healthy, which was something I was a little worried about coming out of camp and the back injury and a lot of talk about, are we going to see Jimmy Garoppolo this year? What's going on? No problem. Not only is he going to stay healthy, but he is going to unlock a next level in his game. And we've seen Stafford in the regular season on the Rams be a little bit more up and down. Still very good. And last year, I think, was underrated how well he played. But there were still some more questionable games in there last year. This year, the consistent dominance from him, the surgical mentality that he's playing with, you see these like 15, 16 play drives where he's just exhausting. He has all the answers to the test. He's like consistently making no-look passes, like with comfort. And it's not just a gimmick. Like, he understands when they're effective and like killing you with it. Like, you understand the level you have to be seeing the field to attempt that with confidence. It's insane. And then you talk about they've expanded the offense that's been really an 11 personnel team for as long as I can remember. And they've had this vision from the get-go to be like a 13 personnel team at times. They've been at the forefront of this league trend and understanding how to get into true heavy personnel to have high efficiency explosive passes out of it and to help your run game. And like, they go and draft Terrence Ferguson in the second round. I thought it was a reach. Nah. Like, nope. Like, he looks good. He can run. He's put on 10 pounds. He's been okay as a blocker. He's been the perfect addition as an explosive weapon out of these packages. They're running the piss out of the football. The O-line looks great. I mean, outside of Puka getting a little bit banged up here and there, this has been a flawless offense. And then defensively, take everything we knew about their pass rush last year, add Byron Young taking a step into the mix. He's been like a legit pass rusher, able to win one-on-one reps, so it's even more dangerous. And then add an actual run defense into the mix, where Poona Ford's been the perfect addition. We talked about Nate Landman being the perfect addition here. Undrafted linebacker, Spates, total stud. Like, he has locked in a role there too. One of my concerns heading into the year was a lighter front that struggled against the run last year. How much better is it going to get? They've been so much better. They're like a legit, complete defense now. And even into the secondary, like, dude, Emmanuel Forbes is good now. Like, that's just annoying. I mean, that's how you know things are going well for you. I do hope they can get Quentin Lake back. He's so good. I know he just had surgery, so hopefully he can get back in there. But I really think the Rams have pulled away in terms of tearing these teams off. They're gonna be hard to beat. They're gonna be really hard to beat. And you got to remember, if they didn't have 2 field goals blocked against the Eagles, they would have gone into Philadelphia and won this game like week 3. So this isn't just a new thing. Like, they've been doing this all year long, and it's awesome. So, and I was too low on him. I was too low on him. Not that I hated him, but definitely should have been higher. Gotta stop underselling the Rams. I feel like I keep doing that, and it's Sean McVay, man. Sean McVay. All right, just a brief little show there. Nothing to see here. Really hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all of the comments down below. Do you enjoy this show? Do you want to see this as a yearly tradition? Please do hit that like button if you have not done so already. I really appreciate it. But that is all I have for you here today. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, and I will see you all next time. Cheers.